What's going on? Welcome to another episode of the Impel Forward Podcast. I'm your host, Leon. And right now I'm by myself, but I have some guests coming on. Yep. Oh, there go Larry.
Yo.
What's going on? Yeah,
I'm
we're here
I'm
tonight. We're here tonight to have this discussion that you brought upon us by your
It's
comment.
on me. It's
By
on
your
me.
comment. Yeah. Make sure you go to impelforwardmerch.com. That's impelforwardmerch.com. impelforwardmerch.com. All things impel forward motion. Yes. And if you're on Facebook, head on over to YouTube. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you share this. And we're going to be talking about, has the black church failed the black community? Has the black church failed the black community? That's going to be the topic of discussion.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there's a lot of people standing on that. I don't know why, but well, I know why. Everybody had their own feelings and thoughts, but y'all head on over to YouTube. If you're on Facebook, head on over to YouTube. Impel Forward Podcast. We live. We are live. Maurice, make sure you unmute yourself. Why can't I unmute you? Because the
You.
Yeah.
Brother
What's
Maurice.
going on, Maurice?
What's up,
What's
fellas?
going on? Yeah, we're going live.
Good to see you, brother.
Make sure
Hey, good
y'all
to see you too, man. It was a pleasure.
We got this Eagles. We got this Eagles fan in here.
you know, every now and then you gotta rep a little something,
Yeah.
Fresh with it too. Fresh with it.
Yeah.
Hey, it's a fresh win and a fresh hoodie or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
How y'all week been so far?
Man, it's for me, it's been good. I mean,
yeah.
So I work in downtown Raleigh, and so now that we have all this snow and whatnot, I've been able to work from home for the week. So it's been good. Not having to drive nowhere. So
yeah, same. Been trying to stay out of the snow, man. I'm pretty glad though. It melted pretty much the majority of it today. So that was good.
Yep.
Where I am. Yeah. You go to the shop today, Leon?
No, I didn't. I was, but I didn't.
Yeah, there you go. Stay off them roads, man.
Yeah, I hear that.
Well, we're gonna go ahead and start. We're gonna go get this comment going. Well, this topic going. I said comment going. Anyway,
what you think, man? What you think?
So, Maurice, what I didn't tell you was Larry one that brought this on.
Hey, I am no man's judge.
I know. Look, so Larry made a statement last week, and he kind of said that we had to step back from the church a little bit. And so that, we had a couple people in the comments that agreed with him, and it felt like the black church was letting us down. So I said that'd be a good conversation to have. Everybody had their opinions and their thoughts. I just want to bring it to the podcast, to the front, and let's have that discussion.
Yes, sir.
Right.
So give you I guess we'll start with you, Larry. And give us your thought again on that.
So my thing is, man, when I say stepping back from the church, is because I feel like it's changed over time in the black community, so to speak. Like we now, instead of worshiping, we're becoming obsessed with it. And that's why you see church in so many different, like it becomes more theatrical now than about the actual worshiping. And I feel like that's leading us in so many different directions. It's exploiting the communities that it's in. And not saying that church is bad. Let me clear that up first. There's definitely a need for it in our communities. But I think the way that we approach it and the way that we interact with it has gone so completely different than how it should be received. Now, I don't have an issue with church or Christianity or any religion. However, my issue is how high the church is placed in the black community. And I think that becomes a problem.
The black church has played a pivotal role in the black community.
Oh, what was that?
I'm over there. I'm trying to maneuver.
Somebody got AI going on.
My bad.
No, you're good. So what I was saying is my issue is how high the church is placed in the black community, that it is overshadowing and it is pulling our attention in so many different directions, but we're losing focus on, okay, how do we actually make real changes? Where's the real power in our communities? And at the bottom line, I think it should be separated. Church should have its thing, and how we handle our communities should be a thing. It's no different than how church and state should be separated, but in some instances they're not, but they operate differently. And when I say that, when you look at a lot of the communities, and this is where I was trying to when I was talking about last week, like if there's something going on in the Black community, like if there's a catastrophic event, we will rally at the church, because it has always been our rallying point. And so we go to our pastors, and we need to get spiritual guidance and comfort from our pastors, and try to get answers. And hey, how can we fix our communities? But if you look at some of these more affluent communities, or even white communities, I'll say that they don't go to their churches. They go to the city hall, the council, and they enact real legislation to make rules so catastrophic events don't happen again in their community. And it doesn't even have to be catastrophic events. I was riding through a community a couple of days ago, and I realized years ago the community was smaller, but they started adding more homes, and the neighborhood started getting bigger. So what that means is there's now an influx of more people. So that created a bottleneck in their community. So in order to get that change, they had to go and talk with City Hall and petition to try to get the roads redone, restructured to widen them out. We don't even do that in our communities, in our Black communities. You know what I mean? But it's just the point of, we look at church as the end all be all for how we manage our communities. The church shouldn't manage our communities. Let me put it that way, if that makes sense.
Maurice, are you still muted?
I'm gonna leave it there.
Yeah, I just muted myself while he was talking. I didn't want to interrupt.
Okay. Go ahead. Give me your thoughts, Maurice.
What's going on, everybody else? Let me welcome everybody.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, let me welcome in KP, and of course the co-host Rene.
Guys,
Hold up. Let's go.
How y'all going on?
Well, let me hear KP thoughts first.
Oh, just right off the bat, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't know if you heard me from what I was saying. So if you got,
I caught the tail end of what you were saying. Right. I think that when it comes to how we view this question and how we take it on, could have several ways to describe it, and a lot of it's going to be based on your time and attendance in church and who you are today. Because I grew up as a Baptist kid who went to church 8 days a week, right? And couldn't wait till I was grown till I didn't have to go anymore. But those foundations are still in me. And so, but I am not a subscriber to the whole belief in the church system per se. It's only because as a 50-year-old man, my faith and belief has evolved. I shouldn't say my faith. My faith is still there. If it sounds, some people identify with this. I'm still a believer of Christ. I'm still a believer of the universe or a higher being that intercedes for us. I do believe that, but there are a lot of things that I don't, because as you get older, you learn a little bit more. And so it puts you in a different state. So in the state where I am now, and I look back at how the church was when I was going to church, it's like Larry said, everything that we did, we went through the church. And before our generation, they did everything through the church, because that's the way they got the messaging out. And that's how they, even when it came to politics, that's how they got the souls to the polls. That was on Sundays. And well, obviously, politicians are getting rid of that, because that's predominantly when a lot of Black people vote. But that started in the generation before us. And so, but it's not like that at this time, because young voters are not in the church anymore. So I'm not going to say that the church failed us in that aspect, because church and state should have been a separate point, but I get why we had to become involved. But I'm gonna say that the black church has failed us, but in ways that mistrust. I think a lot of them are compromised, and it's hard to follow a teachings of a minister or pastor who has kind of been compromised. And when I say compromised, not by the flashy things they have, but by the things that they say and the things that they don't do. And so when we look at our church and our pastor, and he or she supports certain things like certain things politically that we may align with. And then we see another one, same person, looks just like us, but they support something diabolical that's different. And it goes against principal values. And you say, wait a minute, how can you be a man of the cloth if you support things that Jesus would not stand for, and you wholeheartedly, screaming from the bully pulpit? So you just kind of like fall into a place where, you know what, I'm just church. And so a lot of us have fallen back from the church as a result of those type of things. I'm not speaking at forming a caucus and saying we all have, but I know that a lot of black people have fallen away from the community, which is the church. And we don't look to the church. At this point, I don't think any of us to this day, unless we're in ministry, look to the church for anything at this point. And so that could be a failure, because if nothing else, we should be at least to be able to go to the church, all 5 of us here, at least organize at the church, have our meeting, and make our plan of what our movement is going to be. We're not about to do that, right?
I like that. That reminds me of something I said last week, Leon, when I said one of the issues with the black community is that we go to the church, we do our thing, and we stay there. We stay at the church. Like mentally, we stay there. Emotionally, we stay there. Socially, we stay there. Like our power stays there, and we don't pull it out of that. So what you're saying is, I got it. We can go there. We can rally there. We can have fellowship there, but we need to take what we need, what we have, and move it beyond that. That doesn't mean that we putting church on a lower of the totem pole. It means we're expanding, and it needs to go beyond that.
Absolutely.
Explain to me more what you mean by we stay there.
I probably can jump in on this. KP, I feel you 100%. And I talk amongst that with me and my girlfriends, right? Because we have some that go to church, myself. We have some that don't subscribe to organized religion. And then, I have a plethora of friends, right? But I wouldn't necessarily say the church failed the black community, but I will say, similar to what Larry said and what we talked about in our group chats, and similar to KP, is that it has kept black people stagnant. It has kept black people stagnant for many different reasons. One, back in the day, it was only one church to, thousands of people, right? It wasn't as many as it was. So, the word was based on their interpretation, right? And if you're believing that pastor and whatever they're saying, their word, their interpretation of the Bible, right? And you're trying to live in that word. So, and he's saying, do this and do that, and don't derail yourself, or you're going, you're going somewhere, wherever.
Well, you're going to hell. That's what they told us. They didn't. The black church I came in, they didn't sugarcoat it.
Hey, that's the Baptist way.
100%. And that kept a lot of people stagnant, because it was like, oh, I can't sway this way, or I can't think differently, at all, or I'm gonna go to hell, or how dare you? And then down the line, you start teaching your kids that, and that's why KP said he was in church 8 days out the week. I believe I was in church 9 days out the week. It doesn't. A lot of churches did not grow or evolve enough to be able to relay that to their community, to say, you know what, God is going to bless us, right? But also, how can we move forward? How can we grow? Larry said, the white people were taught to go see their congressmen and all of those things. A lot of those people, 1s and 2s on the totem pole, were going to church. So they were believing what that particular congressman said, because he was close to the pastor and he automatically knew. So they kept it in house. There was no involvement.
Right.
That's why preachers teach. If you look at online now, preachers, they're evolving, right? Or the newer ones that are coming out, right? You, Pastor Jamal Bryant, that man been preaching about politics the last couple Sundays.
He
You
has
got other pastors,
No, I was saying he has to. The only way his message is going to reach me through social media is going to be from the algorithms of he's touching on something politically,
right?
Because that's a hot topic, and so that's the only way he's going to actually reach the masses.
Exactly.
So I applaud him for it.
Exactly. And then you have pastors that shying away from it, right? They're like, "Ooh, I don't want to get involved," because really they sway on the other side, but they don't want to lose their their congregation, certain parts of the congregation. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
And it just keeps you stagnant. And I think it's kept us that way. We don't know how to go to a politician and be like, "How can I help, my community or the roads or the schools?" Or, we don't know when these special elections are happening. None of that. They didn't preach on any of those things that would help us outside of our front doors, just on Sundays and at night, and when we having troubles in the water.
Right. That is quick. Not. I think Maurice probably needs to go. I'm not trying to be your moderator here, but to back up what Rene is saying is that in another way, how the church failed the Black community is in this preaching and this teaching. When I grew up, I grew up Baptist, so it was a lot of hooping. You know why? Because it sound good, right? It didn't matter the words. It could have been, peanut butter and jelly. And if you just call on the cadence, and we got used to that. That's why kids can mimic it, because it's a cadence and it's for show, right? And so the pastor would begin with, he would like turn to the Bibles, and in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was of God. And he was, I'm a priest, stop right there. In the beginning, and he just preach on that alone, but never tells you what happened before or what happens afterwards. So you do not actually learn the prophetic word of God. You don't learn. You just know what somebody just preached to you for an hour, and it was just on that. It was no substance, and it wasn't nothing that you could make applicable to going into your life the next couple of days of the week before you can get back to the church. That's kind of what I wanted to get in. And so once you start to learn more what the passages really meant, it's like Rene said earlier, the interpretations that we received was what they told us it was. And I feel where they failed us because there was no teaching. It was just preaching. Okay. And that's a failure.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying about that, preacher. I'm gonna see what y'all. I'm gonna go with Maurice after I read this comment. J. Will NCCU says, "Oh, that's my boy John." John says that's why it's critical that you are in a straight Bible teaching church. The church has gotten away from making disciples, teaching them how to effectively serve the community.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead, Maurice. Let's hear from you.
Yeah. I told Leon, I said, one of the things I want to do is I want to take the posture of a listener in these conversations, because I think there is no, let me say a few things. First of all, I hear y'all. I think that oftentimes we interpret reality through the lens of our own experiences, right? But sometimes our experiences become all encompassing and we speak more broadly than our experience actually allows. And so we'll say things like the church. Wait, you mean like every church in America? or the Black church, as if there's no distinguishing groups, or if you will. It's not the same thing, but it reminds me of like you have an organization.
A generalization.
Right. But if you have like an organization, that has various chapters, like there's going to be some that are more or less prominent than others, more or less faithful than others, more or less instructive, if you will, than others, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Interestingly enough, about recently, Pew Research did a study over the past 10 years talking about religious affiliation and how across the board, religious affiliation in the United States has declined by 1% every year, right? So that's not an increase, of course, of 1%. That's a backdrop of 1%. And that's not just in Christian spaces. That's not just in the Black church or whatever. That's across, organized religious structures in general. But some people would say, like, okay, what is the problem? What is that? Does that equal a failure? Nah, I think it speaks to a broader secularization of American society at large, right? And that people are looking to less religiously, theologically or religiously influenced underpinnings to support their worldview. And so it's not that people are becoming naturally atheistic or something like that, or believe there is no God. It's just that people are looking to other things to support, the kind of basic tenets of their worldview and how they navigate the world. So I think we have to be careful. Failure is a strong term, right? Like if I say to my like I got 3 kids at home, and my daughter, one time she came and she said, she said, "Daddy, I failed." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I failed a test." I said, What do you mean?" And she said, "I got a B." I said, "That's not a failure, right?" Like we have to be more specific about what we mean by failure, because failure has a certain connotation, right? And so I'm not out here to try to, like, excuse me, call somebody to define their terms and whatnot. But I do think it's important, if we start making, as Larry said, generalizations, that we don't now speak in such a sweeping way when we're really talking about a very narrow thing in our own experience, if that makes sense, right?
You're talking about in terms of the topic of church failure?
Yeah. I'm saying in general, like, for example, if I was to say KP failed to clean his glasses, that doesn't mean that, like every pair of frames you own is filthy. I'm just saying we have to be careful with our terms. I'm not saying anybody said anything wrong. I'm just saying let's kind of be charitable, in the sense that we can't make sweeping statements across the board because we just don't have enough knowledge to do that,
I agree. I agree with you, but in those two terms, if you look at fail, and using your example,
right,
as your daughter came in, if she failed the test, failed being the operative word, meaning that you get a chance to do it again.
right.
Failure is you don't get a chance. It's who you are. It's your being. And so I think you're right. We should be careful. And that's why I think the title is "The Black Church Has Failed," and not "The Black Church is a Failure of the Black Community."
Right. And that's the reason why I said that, is because when we talk about broad groups, broad people groups, religious groups, or if you will, the language we use is not always as specific as what we're actually trying to say. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like, and so, yeah, I would say the church in general, the Black church specifically, I wouldn't agree with that statement that the church has failed the Black community. I think the church is not I hold to a belief that the church is a what you would call a confessional community, not just simply an inhabited community. Like just because you go to a church does not make you a Christian, right? And so,
right.
And so in that sense, there's a lot of institutions that bear the banner of people who bear the banner of Christians, the institution that bear the banner of Christian churches, that I'm just not I'm not interested in defending. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't defend an individual, more or less. I can't defend a larger institution, but I can say, like Larry said, broader, sweeping comments and say, okay, here's some historical nuggets that kind of point to some healthy contributions that the church has made to the Black community at large. I mean, we have several figures who have kind of spoken to the health and helpfulness that the Black churches in particular added to the Black community at large. And I think that that's something we have to kind of consider. Before I did this, I jumped in here, I took some notes. I read a ton, and was like, I can't say everything I want to say, but let me say a few things. I came across this quote from ironically from Stokely Carmichael, one of the leaders of the Black Panther Party. Mm-hmm. This is in the late 1960s when he made this comment. He said, the Black church has an advantage over many other institutions, right? He says, because it's able to bring these 4 components together. One, it doesn't have to ask its people to show up. No invitations are required. Every Sunday, masses of folks or Black peoples show up. 2, secondly, it does not have to ask permission to use its space. It has its own its own owned space. The third thing is that it doesn't need or to rent office equipment, anything like that, because it's got everything it needs to function within itself. It's a kind of a self-sustaining community in that way. And fourth, it doesn't need permission from downtown public officials. It doesn't need to go to the governor or the state, whatever the case may be, to accomplish its purposes. So, and he actually made this point. He said, no professional group, not doctors, not lawyers, not accountants, no other group can claim these four things in like that kind of sequence, right? And so I think when we talk, if you kind of remove the black church from the black community, even now, some of these four things in many ways go away because in terms of ownership of property, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that Larry's point about like white churches going to white church, I don't want to, muddy what you said, but being able to go to their elected officials and advocate for various, changes in the community, like, better roads and bridges and all that kind of stuff, like towns and streets. I think that's speaking to the very nature of how Black people have interpreted their experience in this country in general, right? So there's certain liberties and freedoms that certain groups will have been able to access at a quicker pace than Black people, Black Christians in particular. So I think we have to. That's why I'm saying we have to nuance what we're talking about, so that we don't make this broad statement and in that broad generality, we begin to kind of like poke a hole that reveals our own lack of kind of like knowledge in terms of experience and how Black people have navigated their experience as Black people and specifically Black Christians in this country. We have not had the same equal footing. And so again, I'm not out to, I can't defend the, such and such church down the block or Jamal Bryant. That's not my intention. I don't, particularly care for that dude anyway. However, I'm just saying, like, we have to be careful, be mindful of what we're talking about, because if we're not careful, the goalposts for what we're defining as like faithfulness in the community is constantly moving, and then we start talking about stuff that has nothing to do with what the prompt is, if you will. But yeah,
I believe you on that. I can agree with you on that. I think that the issue is, and there are good churches out there, there are amazing churches out there that do a lot for their community, a lot. But we're talking about, and I don't have exact numbers, but the ratio feels off between churches that are not supporting their community. And another thing too, it's not your church's responsibility to support the community. They're basically there to provide that spiritual comfort or that spiritual guidance. It's not there to help you build roads or help you build schools. They can do that on volunteer work if they want. And that's fine. That's totally fine. But the difference is, and this is where two different things is between our community and how we approach the church. We approach the church as the end all be all. That's where we go to get 100% of, hey, what's my next move? I need to go to church and find out what that is. That's where I feel like our issues are in the Black community. And then we have, when I say the ratio is off, we have so many churches that don't know what that next move is for the community. So us as Black people looking for some type of fulfillment in our next move, we can't keep going to the same place that doesn't know what our next move is. You know what I mean?
And which the point you just made, I'm sorry, I don't want to like filibuster.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the point you just made is where I think where I'm trying to make a distinction between an institution and an individual, right? So institutionally, but institutions are comprised of individuals, but institutions actually protect the individual for broader, kind of consequences of navigating public life. And so, for example, I think it's important for us to think about how. That's why I said I think the church is a confessional community, meaning that you have people who are members of churches. I think this is I don't want to sidetrack, derail us, if you will, but I think there's a lot of people who look to the church, the Black church in particular, because of what it had the power it's kind of flexed in the public sphere as it pertains to getting people rights. For example, civil rights movement was largely a church movement, right? Christian movement. The SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Alliance, SNCC, Southern. You know what I mean? So you think about all these different groups that have
all of them came out of the church.
Right.
Yeah. But that's the thing, though, because the church was our only rallying point.
That's what I
was my
said. The
main point.
generation
Right.
before us, that's where they came. SNCC,
Yeah,
all
exactly.
that came out of that. All
Yeah.
Reverend after that, all our leaders was reverends, right? So
Yeah. But this is why I said, and I agree with you too, Maurice. This is why I say there's no separation there. There needs to be separation there. If we're gonna go to church, oh, go ahead, Leon.
No, God want you to explain more about when you get into. I want to know as far as when you say it needs to be separation, and when you say we go to the church and we stay there.
Exactly. Yeah.
What do you mean by that, though? I'm just trying to get an understanding.
Well, and to bounce off what Rene was saying earlier, we go there looking for some type of guidance. Like I'm generalizing what our next move is, but we get stuck on that sliver of or living paycheck to paycheck in the church, basically. But it's not helping us move forward as a community. Like, okay, how do we expand our communities? Like, how do we do that? But we're in the church, and it's like, and like I said earlier, the church is managing the community, and it shouldn't be that way. They should be separate. But when we go to church, everything we do, we stay there. We stay there socially. We stay there emotionally, spiritually. Like we just everything all our community energy is put into the church.
Yeah, I hear you, bro, and I think that to the extent that that's true, and the reason why I frame it that way is because again, I want to give respect to the people who are actually members of healthy local churches that are actually in the community.
They exist.
Right? Yeah. So that's why I'm saying we have to be careful what we're talking about, lest we impugn a whole people group, because of our limited experiences. Again, every single person on this pod right now, we're all super limited, right? And again, so if I'm defending anything, I'm defending the fact that an individual has the liberty to determine how they move in the world, while at the same time that individual may be a member of a local church, and that local church, I think pastors have a ton of different responsibilities. And I think these two things I'm about to say, the nuance is important. So in one sense, because of the fact, like biblically speaking, within the history of the church, has never been a such thing as the black church. It's a social phenomenon that's native to America, European colonialism. And so there never was this. I mean, you have Jews and Gentiles, like people who are not like non-Jewish people, right? And so the Jews had their own communities, own kind of confessional community, meaning you had to acknowledge Yahweh as the only true and living God. But then but they were all supposed to be a community that was a light to the nations, if you will, right? And so you have the Jews here, Gentiles here. So the major clash in all of the scriptures, especially within the New Testament, especially you see this coming up in the book of Acts, but also, all throughout the Gospels, the book of Acts, and then the epistles, this clash between Jew and Gentile. So when you talk about like the black church, it's a social phenomenon that's produced because of racism, because of the evil sin of racism and racial oppression. And kind of this ethnic idolatry, right? One ethnic group over against the other. And so again, I think that's important to note. And so you have so pastors have in the black community have had to occupy so many different roles. I mean, you have like one of my favorite dudes is historically speaking, you got Richard Allen and Absalom Jones. Richard Allen, he left the Methodist Church. Him and Absalom Jones left the Methodist Church because they were being racial oppressed on the basis of their racial identity, of their blackness, if you will. But then you see guys like you see Richard Allen when him and Absalom Jones went to Philly and founded Mother Emanuel AME Church, the first black Christian denomination in the United States. Richard Allen actually he started 3 businesses in addition to him being a pastor, right? So he owned a chimney sweeping company, a shoe making business, and he was a barber. You know what I mean? Shout out to Leon. And so, but with his job, the reason why he created these different companies, one was to supply the needs of his family, but also to supply the needs for employment in the black community. So the church was supplying, not meeting just a theological, spiritual need, but also the practical, physical need here too, right? And so, and you also have Absalom Jones, who started to help start the Freedom Societies in Philadelphia and whatnot. All that to say, the black preacher in America has had to occupy so many different roles. He was the community organizer, he was the jobs provider, oftentimes he was the preacher, he was the counselor, sometimes he was the doctor, some et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's because of and because of racial oppression. The black community at large was like segregated to the margins of society, and in being segregated to the margins of society, the black Christian, i.e. the black pastor, the black church, was the end all be all.
Yeah, we were boxed in.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
So my point, was one. I don't want to cut you off. There's one last thing.
No, it's okay.
So now you have, this, with the after emancipation and then all the years of, black codes and the Jim Crow, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're now having this opportunity where in all actuality, biblically speaking, the pastor was never supposed to be the lawyer and the doctor and the
never.
But at the same time, so there's a theological, biblical reality of what pastors are biblically called to do, and there's a sociological reality of what black pastors have had to do. And so I think we talk about, like, you said when we go to the black church, we stayed there. I think this because of that sociological reality. But I think, James, the brother of Jesus, said, like faith without works is dead, right? Like, one says, I have faith, the other says, I have works. He says, show me, these two are not mutually exclusive. They go together. As a matter of fact, Christian faith is actually faith that works. So what does it mean to make disciples, as one of the commenters said, but also to love our neighbors? So the Great Commission, make disciples, Great Commandment, love God and love our neighbors. And so how do these two things come together? And then they come together through the way that people live their lives ethically. And that ethical work, in terms of like living out their faith in these ethical frameworks, justice is just Christian faithfulness, in like applied Christian faithfulness. I love Martin Luther King said, justice is love with work clothes on. I love that. Because he's acknowledging there's an institutional responsibility and there's an individual responsibility that we have to hold in tension with one another. So I'm on a rant.
So go ahead. You want to say? Go ahead, Rene.
No, I was going to say, I feel like just based on what you said, you guys are speaking the same language. You're just saying it two different ways. Because you just described everything that Larry said as the church, a lot of people holding the pastor or the church itself as the end all be all. And you're saying, well, in those days they had to, they were forced to do so, right? Because that's where that was the only place we could go, right? And build community. So the pastor, he held many different jobs so that he can keep the community and build the community up. I think we still live there. I think a lot of people still live there and depend on our pastors to be that end all be all. And I feel like Larry is saying, also as we evolve technology, ways of thinking, reading the Bible, no matter, and interpreting it how you can. I think people go to church for confirmation. And I think they go to seek answers. And maybe they want to do more, but they're waiting to be told that in most ways. Just my opinion.
So let's do this. Let's apply what you guys just said to the text of the question. Has the black church failed us? Both of you guys both said the same thing, like Rene said, just in a different way. But the pattern that in both of y'all spoke was the onus was on the pastor. And the question is, let's apply it to the question: has the black church failed? The pastor is not the church; he's the pastor.
Right.
The church is this entity in which the people that govern it and how they do, or how people are received into that place. It's not through the pastor, but through the body of the church. And so we probably need to reframe it a little better, or are we going to go to, or we're going to say, we're going to get back to the original question that has the church, meaning the body of the people that's in the church, failed the black community, or we're going to put this on the pastor, which you guys have both agreed that he was set up to fail. If we want to say the pastor failed, but that
I don't know if you can say.
No, what I'm saying is, even though that wasn't applied.
I hear what you're saying, but the pastor as the leader, and he also has the church, the community, the people who
I know that's what I'm saying. Are we
actually
gonna?
the church.
What I'm saying is we need to, if we're gonna continue the conversation, so we'll know where we're going. Are we going to form a passionate community together? We're going to join them together, and when we talk about the church, that encompasses the leader, which is the pastor or the bishop, or are we going to separate the two as far as the leadership and the community? Because both can be considered the church. Leadership is considered the church, and the community, which is the patrons that go to the church and those that serve in the church, could be considered the church, right? Mm-hmm. And they could be two driving forces that drive people away or that fail the community.
Absolutely.
Now you kind of saying what I was going to get to as far as separating the people in church. But hold on. The church, Judy Washington says the church has gone from serving God to wanting to serve their pockets. Now, do we
It's not all of them. It's not all of them.
That's not all of them. That's the thing. That's why that's why I phrased it that way as the church, because that's what people. I asked a number of people this question, and immediately some people just said, "Yeah, that quick, yeah."
Okay, hold on. So this is what I was talking about earlier. I'm gonna let you finish, Kanye West. But earlier, what I was talking about was that, and why this needs to be separated, because the pastor was the church back in the day. There was no separation between pastor and church. You know what I mean? If you saw the pastor, you saw the church. That's how it was back then. But nowadays, I think now we've seen so many pastors do the wrong thing. It's hard to have that discernment now, to put in that time to see.
I don't think it's hard. Well, go ahead.
I mean, some pastors make it obvious off the bat that you can't trust them. You know, they make it obvious.
Go ahead.
But yeah, I mean, I just want to say, I was just to that point of why they need to be separated. That's what I was saying.
Listen, I agree with you on that. Just real quick, about when you talk about those pastors, they make it clearly obvious that you shouldn't trust them. And there are a lot of the reasons why a lot of people will stay away from the church, right? Yeah. And I remember struggling with this, and I had a good friend of mine tell me, because I was like, man, I ain't going to that dude church, man. He running holes, he doing, I ain't got it. And now I'm judging, right? Which is all the way around. As I'm older, I can hold myself accountable. But the one thing he said, man, I don't focus on the man, I just focus on the message. And and that stuck with me. And I was like, it allowed me to take that natural man who is subject to failure. He's subject to it. God never said he wouldn't. And I just take it out of it. And whether he did or do or what he did or do, I don't even care anymore. It's just, is this message good? If it's a good message and it's a prophetic word of God that's like manna from heaven, then absolutely I can roll with it and look past the man in which he in the body in which he sits. Now that one's hard to do, because most of them, if they not really worth their 2 nickels, then their message ain't gonna be worth 2 pennies. So
I think that's where we're getting to. Oh, go ahead.
So actually, let me clarify. I said all that to say, one of the things that I told Leon, I said, man, what I don't want to do is talk a whole lot, but the point I'm making be missed. I was saying all that to say I disagree that the church has failed the community, and I actually also disagree with the idea. Like, again, I think that the church is even the word church comes from the Greek word ekklesia, which means an assembly, right? And so it's not the church has never been the pastor, right? Like, any pastor worth his salt would actually clearly identify that. But 2, my only point is in mentioning the fact that the pastor had to be, had to occupy several different roles, was to say the church as an institution and the pastor as a representative of the institution occupies various roles, right? So I was just trying to say that the church is the pastor. I was mentioning historic examples like Richard Allen and Absalom Jones as a way to say an example of the fact that the institution has had to occupy various roles is pastors occupying various roles. And so I wasn't trying to, so though there may be some overlap between, I think, what me and Larry are saying, I think our conclusions are different. Like, my conclusion is to say, I see where you're coming from, and I get like some of where you're going. I just disagree with the conclusion. It's where the period falls. You know what I mean? It's not all of the commas and the semicolons. It's where the period comes. And I think that point about like people staying, and that's another thing I wanted to say too. Let me clarify this point. I think that it's also important to understand that individuals and groups of Christians have the ability to move in the public sphere in ways that allow them to seek the public good of love God, love their neighbor, and also love God and love their neighbor through corporate and political action that betters the community. I could think of at least 5 different organizations off the top of my head that have worked to better the community and better conditions for Black people. Off the top of my head, I got the AND campaign run by my man Justin Giboney. It's merging like conservative ethic versus liberal action in terms of how we pursue justice in the public sphere or engage political conversation. I could think about the Innocence Project. I think about Equal Justice Initiative. My man Brian Stevenson. You know, he's a Christian too. Like I think about all these, even the historic example I mentioned about the SCLC, there was Christians from various churches coming together, coming out of their own individual institution, their own local autonomous churches to come together and to accomplish various goods that benefited the community at large. And so your point about people staying there, I think the fact that we, everybody on this pod has achieved civil rights through legislation and political action is proof of the fact that people don't stay there. So again, I disagree with that conclusion. I think that we have to be careful, which goes back to my original comment. We have to be careful about what do we mean when we say that, in what sense, right? And that's I told this last thing I'll say. I told Leon before, one of the most important questions I think we need to ask anybody when we're talking to them about anything that we have point of friction on is what do you mean by that? Because we can give us this false sense that we're moving in the same direction when he's like, actually, I don't mean that. Oh snap, we're in a different place. So yeah.
But let me challenge you a little bit on that then. So when we talk about a lot of civil rights actions that came out of the churches, I think because the communities themselves forced those pastors and those churches to take action. And that's why we had celebrity pastors back in the 80s and 90s. Because if you had these atrocities that happen in the communities and people want answers, they want something tangible. They want some real change. You had to get out of the church. They had to go march. They had to go to Capitol Hill. They were forced to make change. And so I think we need to do that now, but as a larger whole in the Black communities. There's nothing wrong with the church. The church is fine where it is. But us as a community, as Black people, we need to step further. We need to step beyond that. That's my whole message is why, okay, let's focus not so much on what we have going on in the church. If we want to make our communities better, what is the actual processes we need to put in place that we can have some actual real results? Because our pastor just can't go and do it. We have to do it as a community.
But I think that's where you lose me sometimes when you say that. What you just said, as far as not so focus so much on the church, but go out in the community. Why can't both be done? Because the church isn't supposed to do that. That's why. No, it's not the church. You're going to the church, but you can step out on your own and do that. I'm assuming that's what KP was kind of saying. I'm not sure. Yeah. But that's where you get me at when you say not stay in the church.
Well, the reason why I say that is because where I am today, and the devil we got to fight today. You can't go with that old spirit of you just can't. This guy wrote this book. What Charles E. Cobb said, that nonviolence here to get you killed. Meaning, what he was talking about with Malcolm X. Now he was with like Martin Luther King, like you slapped me, I'm not turning the other cheek, right? I'm packing, and so. You can't represent the church and go out there and deal with these new devils today. You got to go over there with like the full armor of God, Ephesians tells us.
If you want real results,
ready to go to battle like Israel, and you can have that spirit, but that's where you got to separate. Hey, look, I'm not representing New Bethel AMZ. I'm gonna represent. I'm gonna whoop your ass. You know what I'm saying? That's how you. So it's kind of that's why you got to separate it, because if you go there trying to be nice.
Yes,
you just gonna go back with your head down and with another L. Hey man, tired of taking these L's.
Yeah. And another thing
too, with the full armor of God, though. You know what I'm saying? You still going with the full armor of God.
You go with the armor of God. It's just like God didn't never say that. He said to be mighty in battle. So he telling me right now to be mighty, but he also say put on the full armor of God, right? So that's listen, he's the coach in the locker room amping me up, but that's where he stay, because where I'm about to go on this battlefield, you can't take him with you other than in the spirit. That's what I'm saying. So if you're gonna go out in the community and fight these community leaders, you can't go with that soft tongue of the Bible. You have to go with the tongue of a dragon or a lion. Because if you're Cindy Hall and you're fighting for your community and you was like, well, the Bible said, man, look, fuck off. You have to use a,
hey,
you know what I'm saying?
I mean, you ain't lying. Okay. You're not lying, man. And that's
no, I'm
difference.
telling you, if I get involved in this community and I'm in front of the kid, I'm gonna go viral because I'm like, look, man, fuck all that they saying.
Yeah.
The law says I'm gonna use the law in their face and I'm gonna call them on their shit and I'm gonna call them right in their face.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You're right about that.
And I would say, church, pray for me, but I'm in God's army right now, and this is what He sent me to do. So,
yeah. But, okay, let's look at it this way, and I'm gonna flip the script a little bit because we're talking about how the community is the community.
Hold on before you flip that script.
Go ahead.
What was you about to say on that point, Maurice?
No, what I was going to say is I think we need to be again like. So I think it's important to say a couple of things. One, Christians engaged in social or public action does not equate to soft, punkish, girlish dudes like people in the world. I think we have to be careful before we like think that force, is actually the thing that's like tooth for a tooth. Like, yo, you slap me, I'm killing you. Like, you kill me, like so you know what I mean? Like, you come at me, I'm coming at you. And I think we have to be careful. And this is kind of where going back in terms of like a historical marking, like reference point. Like Martin Luther King's point was not that you couldn't match them, bullet for bullet, tooth for tooth, fist for fist. It was to say, through our nonviolent action, it's exposing the reality of oppression that's being forced upon us. It's not us who are the violent people that the narrative has kind of been spun to project. It's to say the system is this way. And so again, I'm not suggesting Christians, I guess what I'm trying to say is Christians have the freedom to engage in the call, I would even say, in terms of loving their neighbors, to pursue the good of their neighbors. And that even applies to establishing schools. That applies to establishing hospitals. That applies for, in terms of using their knowledge. Like there's Christians involved in in politics, there's Christians involved in the law, the legal system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, who are pursuing the work they're doing but here's the thing. It's not just the work they're doing on the outside. It's what's motivating that work on the inside, right? It's like what Martin Luther King said. I keep referencing him, but he said he had this speech he did about like the street sweeper street speech. Probably heard that when he said, if anybody says, if anybody says that like you are a street sweeper, let it be said that you sweep streets better than anybody, because what's motivating your action, your work, your efforts, if you will, is your understanding. Okay, I need to cut hair excellently because you know why? I love God, and God actually creates excellent. The thing He does with beauty and art is dope. He's killing it. You know what? So you know what? I'm gonna cut this hair and I'm gonna do my best to kill it. I'm gonna go pursue education. Guess what? Why? Because if I'm going to get this education, I'm going to be a lawyer. Why? So I can make a bunch of money? Oh, no. But I'm pursuing justice because God is a God of justice. So all I'm trying to say is that let's be like, I don't want to be so quick to put softness, quote unquote, like cowardice as a natively Christian thing and say like force is like, I'm going to leave that to the side. I'm just saying that like, as you pursue action in the world, like you ain't got to be a soft, silver-tongued dude. I come from a real place. I live in a real city. I deal with real people. We deal with real people, and I'm just saying, like, let's not be quick to create that caricature that if you go out here, like Stokely Williams said, that nonviolent stuff will get you killed. But look at all of look at what those movements are, and look at where the movements that through nonviolent passive resistance have actually, like, it seems like the fruit seems to be on the let's actually love our neighbors and not in this way. So again, I'm just trying to say.
Well, I would push back just a little, just a little, Maurice. But I do agree that it shouldn't cast an aspersion that because you're coming from the church, you weak. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying you take that with you, but you're going to have to step it up a bit. And I'm not casting aspersions saying that everyone that comes from the church go into City Hall or fight for the community is some kind of soft. Because even as you invoke Martin Luther King is what you're saying, and what got him killed is he started getting away from that nonviolent stuff. His last book was Chaos of Community, right? Remember that? And it was based off of Malcolm X talking about the Ballad of Bullet. These guys started getting more radical in what they were doing. They realized that nonviolent. They realized that, hey, you cannot meet a hammer with a nail. You're gonna have to remove yourself so that the hammer could not keep nailing on you. And that's all what I'm saying. If you look at Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, he started evolving. And you listen to his messaging. He started evolving. And like I said, not all those guys were soft. Hell, Adam Clayton Powell come out of ministry. He wasn't no soft guy either. You get what I'm saying? A lot of these guys wasn't soft. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that they were able to separate the two, and they were like, all right, Martin, that's cool, but this is how I'm going to approach this. But he evolved himself.
An interesting parallel is King toward his towards the end of his life before he was assassinated, and Malcolm X toward the end of his life when he was assassinated. They seemed like not that they flipped, but that their philosophies was much more mingled with one another, meaning that there's a middle ground between this form of action, this form of engagement, and there's this form of engagement. And so you see guys like Malcolm X who actually said, "I was wrong. I shouldn't have advocated for our people to be out here, on some super militant stuff. Now be organized, be structured, be disciplined." Well, at the same time, we have to love people, and so he actually said he was hoodwinked, and bamboozled toward the end of his life. I guess my only point in saying all that, and I'm not trying to derail us. I'm just saying, there are Christians have that people. Since we're talking about the church, Black church, has it failed? Is it been a failure to the community? I'm just saying many Black Christians in the past and now are working towards the good of the city, the good of the communities they live in, the good of Black people in general. And again, I could send you a short list of a bunch of different organizations where Christians from various denominational or traditional backgrounds coming together to seek the good of their communities, not to mention the countless churches and church organizations I could kind of reference. I'm just saying, I'm with you. If your faith doesn't motivate you, you're just going to receive a good word to help you sustain yourself for the next week, then you're actually not being equipped to be faithful in your community. What does it look like for you to help Miss Jones down the block, or my neighbor right across the street from my house? One of my neighbors is Asian. His wife had a stroke, and my faith says, you know what, Mr. Hong, I'm going to go and serve Mr. Hong. I'm going to actually go chop it up with him. I'm gonna bring him dinner. Why? Because it's not just because I'm a nice person. It's because I actually want to love my neighbor, because God, Jesus loves his neighbor, the people made in his image, and he came to serve them. It's Jesus, the Son of Man, came not to serve, not to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom. So again, in that sense, if your faith doesn't motivate you towards action, whether that be action in loving your wife and kids well, or loving your neighbors well, killing it on your job, being a beast in your, you training young men and young women, equipping them, then your faith is faith without fruit is really not at all. And now you can't blame that on the church. That's the person.
All right, go ahead, Larry. Do you remember what you had to say? I'm gonna go to some of these comments.
Oh yeah. I was talking about, let's flip the script real quick. So we're talking about how the community's relationship with the church, and that's an internal relationship. But another area that the church can be seen as failing as a community is an external relationship. What I mean by that is the church can also be a gateway to that community. And you see it all the time through election years, where politicians who've never been in the communities before all of a sudden makes a stop by those churches. And now the church is they're coming in to get those votes for those church. Whatever promises they're promising them. Now, is it the church's responsibility to protect that community from those external threats that hurts that community? What do we think about that?
So to your point, to what I said earlier, this is where the failure comes in, or fail, is because when you, as a leader of that church, allow those political pundits to come in that you've never seen, because he greased his hand to get in there. So it said, what I said earlier is they're compromised. So it makes you not trust none of it because they're compromised. Because you're like, wait a minute, how do we got Candace Owens in our church? None of us would, like, he compromised, right? You know it. And I'm using her, but it said like figure, right? You know he's compromised,
right?
And so now you just got rid of a lot of people that would have been in your church.
Or you're confused.
I guess it depends on what party you claim yourself to be part of.
It ain't even got nothing. The party of green, the party of money. The party of money.
I don't care what church you are in America.
No, I'm talking about.
I don't care where you are in America. If it's a black church, I'm willing to bet you 98% of it is just black facing and black supporting.
I'm talking about feeling
Very
that
seldom
way.
you're gonna see an all black conservative church. Can I get an amen? Where they at?
Hey, you know,
I'll tell you where they at. They're the other church, and they're white facing.
Yeah, there you go.
Hold on, let me read some of these comments.
All I hear is shot. Hold
on.
Hey.
No, I agree, KP, because we go to church. We go to church to seek answers and confirmation, right?
Hold on, y'all. Hold on. Let me read some of these comments before I read the comments. Make sure you go to impelforwardmerch.com, impelforwardmerch.com. All things Impel Forward merch. See what we have to offer.
Get 1, 2, 3, or 10.
1, 2, 3, or 10. Rene says get 1, 2, 3, or 10. Thank y'all for y'all support. Ty Jones, Taisha, what's up, cuz? She says the church hasn't failed the community. The community has failed itself in the lack of self-control, drive, etc. Etc.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one, though. That's a tough because
I've seen. Wait a minute. Before I was gonna get to that too, but she said it. I've seen other people say that the community has failed the community. I've had, because I've been asking people this question all week, and trying to get some response. Some people say the community has failed the community, not so much the church, and it should be all put on the church.
True. Personal agency from us all is the number one driving factor to make all of this work. The church is nothing without personal agency from you, and you. If you're not. If you don't have any personal agency in making a better version of you into this world, i.e. your children or your grandkids, then you have failed the community because you put Jason and Freddy Krueger out there about you not being there to raise them, right?
Yeah.
You failed the community. Yeah. And so it don't even get to the church.
But I think it's different specifically the black community just because the church is such a pivotal point. Because you can say police stations have failed their communities. I know hospitals.
No. They serving us just like the slave they were born out to be.
You know what I mean, though. You know.
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
Yeah,
we can't. It ain't the help ain't coming from there.
Yeah. Oh, facts.
And Ronnie Robinson said, "I'm confused. Wasn't he saying the church was failing the community last week?" Those were your exact words. That's where the title came from.
Yeah, that's where all of this is coming from, bro. And we breaking it down. Down. I don't know when you hopped in on the pod, Ronnie, but catch the replay, bro, from the beginning.
Yeah. So one of the things that comes to my mind too, we talk about like how churches contribute and have contributed to the community. There's a really good book. My bad. I'm super ghetto. My bad. It's called The Color of Money.
Dr. Greg Carr does the same thing if anybody follows him.
Yeah.
I'm the only one that watched Dr. Greg Carr.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
I never heard of him. But hey, I bet he's a good man. But this book right here, The Color of Money, really, really helpful. And so you think about like things that the black church or black Christians have, or even the black community at large have had to do for themselves. You think about the industries that people didn't think black people were worthy of, right? So you got Madam C.J. Walker, who became one of the first black millionaires, right? But what was her industry? Beauty, right? And how do you create, like, the reason why that was such a big thing is that the black community, the black community at large had spending power. However, when you're told by an oppressive system that the standard of beauty is a white woman, then the economic incentive to go out and like create products that benefit black people Why would you do that if you don't think they actually are people, right? And so I'm just so what she says is the author makes the point in saying that all of the industries, that many of the industries that were created to benefit the Black community were started by many of them. This is not a Christian author, so it's not stilted in that way. And so she makes the point, and I have a quote here. She says, you have organizations, many Black churches will contribute their resources to create housing programs because VA loans were denied to veterans. You have VA loans. GI Bill was not allowed to go to these individuals, and many of them actually created Black funeral homes, again from churches, because the Black body, they wanted to treat it with dignity and not just leave it. If someone was lynched or killed, they would just leave the body hanging or just cut it down and throw you in an open, unmarked grave. But as the Black community, specifically Black churches, have stepped in and said, no, we are people of dignity as well. We are made in God's image, just like every other person on the planet is. And so we want to dignify our dead by actually burying them, right? And so that's why the funeral industry is such a big thing. Like there's so many Black-owned Christian-based funeral homes, the beauty industry, the music industry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The reason why these industries were kind of established was because Black people, and specifically Black Christians, said we want to provide dignity and dignifying opportunities to our community. So what the commenter said about like, it's not the church that failed the community, it's the community that failed itself. Well, I think it depends on what we understand. This is a go way outside of the scope of this conversation, but it's connected. What does it even mean to be a Christian? How does a person become a Christian? Like I said,
that's going to be the topic of the next. See that right there? That's going to be next week's topic.
The reason why that's important though is because we can't just say it's the Black church that has failed or is a failure. We actually have to take some responsibility and say no one's a Christian by virtue of the fact that you're Black in America, right? Like I remember, my family's Muslim. I'm Christian, but my family's Muslim. And we're talking to my brother, one of my brothers, and we were just randomly talking about how we came to our own faith conclusions and whatnot. And he said, I used to be a Christian, and I said, brother, what? Why do you think you were a Christian? He said, I used to go. Dad used to take us to church, and I said, so you were a Christian but I thought you was running through all the chicks in the street and you were fighting and not killing, but you were fighting and wilding out on the block. Like you were selling that, you was giving that workout like that, but you were a Christian because you went to church. And so we think about like how what the state of our communities are. I think we just have to be careful about what are we talking about? That's why I said one of the most important questions nowadays is, what do you mean by that? Who fits the description of what we're talking about? That way we know where to place the blame.
Well, you're talking about as far as when people consider themselves Christian. I think the point that you made about your brother, I remember that state, being out there running rush out over the community, smashing this chick, running this and running that. If you ask me then, hey, you're supposed to be a Christian. Man, I ain't no Christian, right? At that time in my life. But when you talk to me now, I say, well, man, I'm a Christian. So it like I said earlier, it depends on when you meet people and where they are. The ones like you said, Plies called himself a Christian. Yeah. He called himself a Christian now because of the way he dictates his way through the world today, the same way I do.
But here's the thing.
Careful. That's why I identify as a Christian. But if I know that I'm out here robbing and killing, still doing things, you'd be like, man, you out there robbing your own brother here, man. I'm not on that right now. I'm on demon time, right?
Here's the thing.
Where people are.
So here's the thing. My brother actually is not a Christian. He's Muslim.
Well, I'm just saying you were challenging him about, man, how you a Christian? I know why you were doing it. Like, what made you a Christian? Because you went to church? That's what you was like. Like, no, that made you a Christian.
Right, and that goes back to our conversation. How has the church, failed the Black community? But I would even go so far as to say being a Christian is not like Christian. It's like, what I mean? And so I think in reality, like the evidence of a person's life shows what they really believe at the core of their life and at the bottom. Like, and so so I think this conversation is extremely important for many, many reasons. And I think that the Black community at large, we have to give one another the dignity of being diverse. We're not monolithic that way. And so we have to so you're dynamic. Like every person on this pod is different with a whole different set of experiences, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it might strike somebody at the core for somebody to tell them, yo, you actually never were a Christian. Like, you just grew up in the tradition. What normalized being a Christian is because that's just the water you swim in, but you actually are not. You're actually not a Christian. It's like there's a lot of people who grow up in Islamically influenced countries. They're actually probably not Muslim. They're just culturally Muslim because it fits their demographic. And so I'm saying if we're talking about how the church has failed the Black community, let's be real. Like I think there's a certain reality that comes into this convo about many people who attend churches are not Christians. There's like many bikes that are in garages are not cars. You know what I mean? And so
well,
I think
I agree with you with that. But if we want to, I'm glad that you brought up the Muslim point, because if you bring up the Muslim in that question we pose, has the Muslim church failed the community? Right? We'll be like, no, brother, you go down to mosque number 9, you go down to the mosque, them brothers, they in there, right? They about the community, they tight, right? They tight. They was dress right dress because it's I guess because it got away from the Christianity and more of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is more tight knit, right? And so, are they serving the community? Or they say, yeah, you not gonna mess with the FOI, right? You know, or the fruit is you just not gonna do it because they of the community, by the community, and for the community. And so, if we drag them into it, we can't say they failed the Black community. Now we can say the community failed. You get what I'm saying?
That's a good point.
That's the reason why I initially started what I was talking about. This Pew Research study that said that, you know, religious affiliation among Americans at large is declining by 1% every year. That's not just Christians. That's even in Muslim communities where those numbers are declining. It's because of this broader secularization. People are fine. It's not that people don't have nothing to do at Sunday at 11 o'clock. People are going to brunch. You know what I mean? Like people are
day parties,
day parties, and all that.
Yeah, you can find KP at a day party.
Oh, Steve, now you telling on me, man.
So,
listen, look, man, I ain't no Christian.
He a different Christian.
And I guess that's what I'm trying to say is like, so the thing that we use to measure success, I think that is really what we're talking about. What is the measure of success? And I love what my man Eugene Robinson, he's wrote this book called it's called Disintegration. And he says there's no such thing as one Black community. There's actually at least 4 Black communities. Like he says there's a transcendent Black on the basis of class. You have, you know, people who are super duper wealthy, much influence, et cetera, et cetera. That's transcendent Black. Then you have the emergent Black. That's the middle class, upper middle class Black. Then you have the forgotten Black. That's the under-resourced, marginalized Black. Then you have the emergent immigrant Black, right? People who are kind of riding the coattails of legislation that was meant to provide civil rights to African Americans, et cetera, coming in, and they're now, you know, taking advantage of those opportunities. And so we talk about the Black community.
Meanwhile, the reason why separating themselves from us.
Right. And that's one of the reasons why this conversation can be so it's like the target can keep moving because our understanding of what the Black community is so different. And so in each group defines success differently, you know? And so, and I think even more so, we talk about religious affiliation, you know, if the trend is going, we're becoming more and more secular across every religious distinctive. And so I think, but Christians in particular have a responsibility to love their neighbors and also not to do it with this kind of like, look at what I'm doing. It's just living. Me serving my neighbor across the street and my like giving tickets to the museum to my neighbor down the block actually is never going to get me recognized on the news. But guess what? It's accomplishing some particular good for the good of my community I live in. And I think
I can go live and show that I'm going to do that.
I think that's why. I think that's one of the things that causes. That's one of the things that causes a lot of problems. Is the constant need to promote, like this self-promoting. Look at what I'm doing.
They need that. They need that affirmation it's wrongfully placed, and it's a sickness, and I don't know how you heal from it.
Say that again. What are you talking about again, KB?
I was making a joke when he was saying that he would do something for his neighbor, Basically, he was talking about being in his Christian walk, doing things for his neighbor, but the local news is not going to broadcast it, nor that he want it. And I'm making the thing, so no, just go live on Facebook while you're doing it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I
got something for you,
that's what I was mocking it. How people, when they're doing things, is supposed to be from the good of the heart or the good of a Christian walk, they publicize it, and that's you're getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah, something happened.
Uh-oh.
Let me see. The community. John said the community no longer looks to the church. What happens? How did that happen? The echo.
Finish.
Anyway,
That's why I stopped talking, because
it says the community no longer looks to the church because there is no distinction between a follower and unbeliever. Most churches don't live any different. Now, I would say, let me say something before I go on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that when it says most churches don't live any different, I'm assuming he's talking about some of the people in the church. That's another thing when we say that most churches, a lot of times we got to distinguish. We're talking about the people, some of the people in the church. Okay, this is why the American church has failed. Yeah.
I don't.
All right, hold on. Let me read a couple more. This topic can go.
I can read it again.
Okay.
yeah,
okay.
this topic can go. It's very layered. Someone was saying it.
There you go.
I got another script flipper for you too.
Mm-hmm. So the community no longer looks to the church because there's no distinction between a follower and an unbeliever. Most churches don't live any different. This is why the American church has failed.
Because they are preaching the same word. They might be doing it different ways. But it's the same word they're preaching.
I don't think he meant by preaching the same word. I think he meant by people in the church doing
People
certain
don't
things.
Any different, or is it the people don't live any? I don't.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that's what he's meaning. That's why I look at it anyway.
Okay. I mean, we all interpret everything different. That's why we're here, right?
Yeah. What do you think he meant, Rene? Or what do you think that means?
I don't know. I'm trying to process it.
Trying to dissect.
Yeah, for sure. The community no longer looks to the church because there is no distinction between a follower and an unbeliever.
Everybody's welcome.
Maybe because their churches are, they're full of, many different people and walks of life and
hurt people, broke people.
Well, that's what the church is supposed to be.
Right.
That is the true definition of a church. Other than that, it's the old cliche. You're just preaching to the choir, right? So it should look the four classes. It should look like the four classes of people in which my man just spoke about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that point about like how Christians, this what this commenter is saying, that there's no distinction. I think they're talking about they're getting at a point that I was trying to make by saying let me like make it even more plain. I think that for all of us, like our understanding, like I agree fully with Larry when he said in terms of a separation of church and state. But you can never divorce, separate religion and politics, because our understanding of who God is it's the soil from which all of our ethics grows, the things that we actually do in the world, right? And so I think if your understanding of God is that, you're going to live this life of God wants you to be healthy, wealthy, and prosperous, and have a Benz, and go ahead, get you the Bentley. God is with you, like all that kind of stuff. Then then that impacts the good news you believe that God is bringing. And I think that to me causes a huge problem, because that does not come from the scriptures. It comes from a really this man-centered desire to avoid suffering in the world. And so God, of course, would say that because you say that. You know what I mean? It's crazy when you start you close your eyes. God sounds a lot like you when you talk, don't he? Like, and so again, I think the ethics piece is what they're talking about. It's like, what do you do? Like, how actually do you live in the world? How you actually showing you this is what you believe, and that shows up in the things that you do. It's kind of like it's like the engine that drives the car, you know.
Right.
Yes, like I said, I'm serving my neighbor, but it's not because I'm trying to be seen. Underneath my hood, the engine in my car is I actually love God. And because I love God, I want to love my neighbor. As a matter of fact, Jesus said, they asked, "What is the greatest commandment?" He says, the greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart, your mind, and your strength, and all your strength. He says, and the second greatest commandment is like it: love your neighbor as yourself.
Mhm.
So how am I loving my neighbor? So yes, my love for my neighbor means I'm going to go protest if one of my neighbors is killed unjustly by a police officer. I'm going to go out here and, like, my wife, for example, was a police officer, and my wife, when she was a Christian, the reason why she was a police officer, she said, I actually think we need police officers to serve our community because they want to seek the good of the city, not just the punitive measures that it takes to correct a society, correct the city, like correct the community. She was like, no, as a Christian, I have to go out here and do something. Like my faith just can't be 30,000 feet in the air. It has to have some practical, tangible elements in the world that I live in. Why do I not abuse my kids? It's because, like, there's a difference between me beating my kids and me disciplining my kids, right? Like, why don't I cheat on my wife? Like, it's not just because she's gonna kill me if she find out. No, it's because I love God, and because I love God, I love my neighbor, love my wife, and then loving my wife. Paul said in Ephesians 5, like, yo, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church, washing her with the water of the word. How did Jesus love the church? Lay down his life. Yeah, I die for my wife, but am I willing to lay down my preferences for my wife? Am I willing to lay down my privileges for my wife? Am I willing to advocate for her, even if it means I'm being put back, right? And so I think that when we talk about ethics and the things you do, that's what I'm saying. Like, now that has multiple layers because we're multiple layered people. Like, what I do in politics, what I do in the growth, like, if I lived in a food desert, I'm going to be advocating. I'm going to be protesting in City Hall. I'm going to be advocating to bring grocery stores to my community, not just because I want good groceries, but because my community needs groceries for them to flourish, because I love my neighbor. And so again, I think this distinction between the believer has a different engine behind why they do what they do versus just I'm trying to do this because I'm a person.
So here's what John said, which is kind of what I thought he was saying. He said, why? Because the church has made it comfortable to live any kind of way. Well, that's kind of that part. I don't think the church necessarily. I mean, the preacher can do it so much, or the teacher, however you want to do it. But it's up to the person, to me, who's receiving the message, to take that, even if they're not going to church, or they just read the Bible, or
shouldn't the church be accepting of the person who goes to day parties, drinking, blow weed, whatever? Maybe,
wait a minute. Hold on. Not accepting, but teaching. Hold on. To live any kind of way as long as you come to church. I don't think it's like I said, the preacher or the teacher, however you want to say, the preacher, teacher, he can preach the word, bring forth the gospel. But the people in the crowd, who's ever attends this church, he can't, like you said, the church is full of all different kinds of people. People go for different things. If you had a day party, drinking, blowing weed, picking up chicks, etc., you just like the world, which is true for some people, a lot of people. So that's what he was explaining. That's what we kind of got that. That's what he's saying. So in that case, you just have to separate yourself from those people.
So he's saying if you see the same people out on Saturday, you go to church and see them in church, you like, is it really the church?
Same people.
Is it really the church fault that they're there?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. No, to me, no.
You get what I'm saying? So that's it's.
But they should be welcome there, right?
Come as you are now is what you said earlier. It is the word of God is about landing in fertile soil and not fallow ground, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The whole goal of the passage is just to cast a seed. Now, where it lands, whether it's on fallow ground or fertile soil, that's when it's going to take root. And when you no longer see that person at the day party, when you go to the day party, you don't see him, but you see him at church.
Yeah. What you were saying earlier,
point, some conviction has set in of the seeds that have been casted upon them through that minister. Mm-hmm. Now it is growing and sprouting because it was fertile ground.
What you were saying earlier about they wouldn't allow that over the Muslim and Islam churches. You can't even.
Oh no.
You can't even get through the doors with that. It's a tighter, stricter policy. But over here,
Yeah, man, you got to give up pork. You got to give up white women. I might give up that pork, man. Coach, I can't now.
Chill out, man. Chill out.
No, I'm just joking.
Hey,
Boy, I ain't
but
always joking.
But that's a huge difference too.
Well, I ain't actually joking. I'm just playing around.
Do you say what?
Do you think that weakens the community? Because we have such lax guidelines that weakens the community.
Yeah.
Do you tell people not to come to church?
The pastor not going to tell them, because that's just one more body that can give 10 or 15 or even $25.
Yeah. Come on, man. Stop that, man.
He don't care.
Okay. You saying that gonna take you saying that gonna take this is. I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. So when it comes to this, because this has been a talk for years in the barbershop as far as pastors or churches, big churches, I guess wanting bigger things and nice things, right? Mm-hmm. I always say first, pastors are humans first, like we all are humans first.
Thanks.
They want nice things like we want nice things. Mm-hmm. People get an understanding when they read the Bible, when it comes to talking about 10% tithing and giving, they can interpret that for themselves. If they want to give to that pastor, that's why I guess that's what Larry come in at too, is I guess the discernment of the pastor doing good, what he doing with the money, and this and that. They like nice things like we like nice things. Why can't the pastor have nice things? Like we want nice things. That's what I say all the time. But we ain't got to go there. But y'all can comment when we want to.
I mean, that's a whole different subject for
it is. Right. I said that because KP said something about the money. They ain't gonna turn out nobody.
So someone was saying that the church is looking like the club now. He didn't say it in there, but I'm paraphrasing. And I think we were going to the point to like, well, do they turn these people away? No, that pastor's not turning that away, because that's another $5, $10, $15, $25. He does not care what they look like.
No, because
why would he turn them away?
It's with hope.
He's trying to help us.
Yeah, he's trying to help. All right, I get it.
Go ahead, Rene.
Leon pointing towards me because if it's a day party, I'm gonna go, but I'm also gonna.
That's not why I'm pointing towards you. Yeah.
Look at her. She's guilty.
Listen, my pastor knows. Pastor Nate. Shout out Pastor Nate. Shout out Lady
now
T.
Church. Yes.
Now church. They accept me for who I am, right?
As well as you should.
Again, as I continue to grow in my walk, right, I will eventually get there. Right.
But here's the point, Renee. I think what you're doing is fine. The word says to be in the world, but not of the world, meaning that I could be in the church, or I could be in the club, or I could be at I shouldn't say club, but I'm saying it's how you conduct yourself when you in this body of place, right?
Right.
You could be anywhere, but you're doing the right things. Now, if you're in the strip club and you're reading the Bible, it looks weird. I get that.
Yeah.
But you could be at a day party and conduct yourself, as the Bible, as the church say, conduct yourself accordingly. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I am not the judge of man. So,
right.
But I'm saying you are there because you acknowledge that there is a living God and that you do serve a living God, and that you are not only that, you are beholden to the how you was brought up by your parents and a respect of yourself. So if you at the day party being who you supposed to be and not who you not, you good.
Who's to say I'm not spreading the gospel at the day party?
You wouldn't get ran up out of there. I don't want to hear all that.
Hey, let me drop one more thing though. So we've been, throughout the conversation, we've been talking about how does the church fail or fails the Black community, but we really, and we've hinted on a couple of things, but we haven't actually set out how does success look like when the church works for the community. We haven't really defined.
I think, the only church that I can think that looks like success is the Muslim. Those mosques, those brothers, the way.
Well,
that's just my lived perception.
True,
I could
be
way wrong because I'm from the South. I'm from Louisiana. I just moved to North Carolina 2 years ago. I'm not used to being around the Philly Jones. You guys are none of this. All new to me. You guys, y'all dial, all that stuff is new to me. I've never met a Muslim. Muslims are not. It's not that religion is not heavy.
Right.
It's just not there. Whereas now I run into my Philly dudes. you know, or my New York guys and all these guys, they Muslim background. Chicago, so the Chicago guys, everybody has this different. So it's an eclectic group of people that I'm now seeing, and so I don't know. I'm only casting aspersion on that. I think that if I was here, if I was in Philly, if I was in Chicago, I'd probably be Muslim because I like to be I like to be radical.
Okay, I got you.
And if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. You know.
No, that's your experience. That's your experience.
I would be radical.
I'm going to agree with Maurice and say that we have to be, selective. I mean, we can't. We have to be selective in when we talk, because you said, the only church that you or group of people that you see that are doing for the community, you would say Muslim, right? That's what
I'm saying, and I could be wrong.
Would say also there's other churches, and I'm sure Maurice can name a few. I'm pretty sure I could say, Now Church, because I see what they're doing for the community, right? Mm-hmm. But that's just and that's what I see. But
and we've touched on this throughout the conversation. And Maurice, you dropped a ton of examples of churches that are helping their communities. But how do we set parameters that a community is thriving, that a church is feeding back into their community? Is it safer streets? Do they have schools that are up to code? Like, what are some examples? And I'm saying it's not even the church's responsibility to do all of that, though. And that's, from my point of view, that's why it should be separated. So how do we have a point of contention where the church?
Wait. No, hold on. You said it's not the church's responsibility to do all that.
Right. Yeah. It's not.
But in your statement, you said that the church has failed the Black community.
I'm saying how? They failed the Black. Okay. Look at it this way. How is the church feeding into the community to create a thriving community? And this whole conversation was because Black community going to the church, but we're not getting what we need to be a thriving community, because we put all of our power into the church.
Well, the church is, in much respect, Larry, the church is so limited. And I think what you're asking is, what is our measure of success to say, no, Maurice, you lying. Them churches are not successful because their community is terrible, right?
Right.
Because there is in order to have a beta, you got to have a delta, right? Mm-hmm. So you're asking, what is the measure of success?
What is the measure of success? Right.
There is. We would have to define what that is, because I would say the measure of success is by, like they said, you can tell the fruit by the root, right? Okay. And so when you hear a lot of people that are in the community, they have a rise in community activists, community leaders, and all this, and all them represent Bethel AME Church. Yeah. Then you will say, you know what, that church producing some fruit, because you can tell by the root. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That will be the only barometer I think that you can add, but we haven't set that yet. We haven't set what the barometer is for success.
That's why I feel it's two different. It's two different instances, because your church is not supposed to manage the community. You know what I mean? But it
manages through putting better product out in the community by way of the church.
It could. Yes, it could. The Black community is just the Black church and the Black community. I know that's an American thing, but it's reality. We are so unique across the globe. Like, our thing is different from all other communities. You know, the church has always been our focal point. And so when we talk about, okay, well, how is the church failing the community? Because that's the one place that we go to get our answers, for one thing, but yet we don't have thriving communities. So what do? Right? So how do we even measure? How are we measuring this? We can measure the failure. It's easy.
Yeah.
The failure.
Yeah, it's easy to point to failure. I don't know. It's honestly, I guess that's an open question to the panel. I don't know, because if we base the measure of success on what has the church did or didn't do, right? Mm-hmm. It was successful when on Sundays is the only day that they can actually not work, and they were able to praise God. And in their praising God is where they got their message. Hey, this is where we're running. This is the time we're going. When you see this hung up on this tree, and we did that through song. So the church was very successful in helping leading people to freedom by way of song and coding and messaging, right?
Okay.
And it was also an escape place from the harsh British reality that they were subjected to. And so it was a success, right? And so
Yeah.
you just but we still haven't defined what was the church supposed to do that, or we use the church to do that.
True. And there's been glimpses of things that has been successful. Like church used to be hugely successful on the family cohesiveness. You know, like there was daddy, mama, children, everybody was there. Grandmama was there, granddaddy was there. It was huge. Like everybody was in on that. You don't even see that nowadays. Like that's not even a thing anymore.
It doesn't. Well, again, I haven't been to church, so it's like my man Maurice said earlier, an hour and a half ago. It's like we don't have enough experiences with churches to say one way or another about the church. But I will say that I don't know if they're preaching a nuclear family. I don't even know if they're doing it, because who goes to church more than all of us? Black women. And what are they preaching? Yeah. They don't need us. So they may not be.
That's another conversation. That's another conversation.
No, I'm just saying.
Now, Katie, we friends. We friends, Katie.
I know. I just wanted to,
all of them ain't saying that.
I know. We know. But y'all looking because y'all know I ain't lying, right?
Well, that's the social media topic about women not needing men. But
you saying that, but let me out that day party talking to him, Leon.
Nah, let me read. Nah, I love social media. It's all over social media. Look, the church is supposed to SL. The church is supposed to be a hospital. If a patient comes in and asks for help, they can accept it. Well, the church, they can accept it and heal the wound, or reject it and the wound spreads. It's all about discernment. Hold on, let me get this. The question is, how do we see success and how are actions measured, and who defines the measure?
That's what we were saying earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I hear. Go ahead. I don't want to cut somebody off.
No, I'm real quick. I'm just keep it real brief, man. The only reason
I sat back and I'm like, let me see where this goes. It's like 5 conversations that happen.
This is why I was saying, like, it's so important for why I was saying the whole reason for this was I was saying the Black community to step back a little bit, because we're so heavy into it that we're not putting our energy and potential into some of these other areas that could make us thrive in communities. And that has nothing to do with the church is a failure. It's the fact that energy we're putting into it could be placed in better areas to make us thrive in communities.
It don't have nothing to do with the church period, or stepping back from the church period. That's where you keep losing me with that. The community can do it itself without church, without
where the community going? Where they going to?
But that's what I'm saying. What? No,
they're going to the church.
Not community organized. Not today. If you look at through the only organizing that has been happening is through political uprising or political organizing. That's been the biggest thing. But it ain't coming through the church, brother. It's coming through organizing through what we on right now, Zoom and all this, and getting the word out. And hey, everybody's meeting at the Target A, and you know what I mean? Well, they're not meeting at the church and taking a bus ride to the places anymore.
Yeah, right. Agree with that.
So
let Maurice say something, man. Go ahead, Maurice.
Let Maurice go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, bro. We forget about you, bro. Go ahead, drop the line.
I'm trying to be courteous.
Go ahead.
No, I think this conversation has shifted, a bunch of different things, especially as Leon and whatnot is clicking through the comments. I'm like, okay, like that. Each of these comments could take the conversation in a bunch of different ways, and I think that's kind of. I'm like, it's been interesting to hear, where, my fellow panelists have kind of landed when it comes to certain things. But I think it's important. When we talk about like success, like you talk, his name KP. Yeah, he mentioned, if he had to choose, he would be a Muslim, right? And so,
yeah, I see this. I see somebody saying that right now about saying I'm tripping. I didn't want to say. I read it and I was like, well, I don't understand it. I want to understand it. Maybe you can help me understand.
Yeah, I came out of Islam before I became a Christian, and that's why me and my brother were having that conversation, right? Because because he's like, I don't know how you're a Christian. Like, I just don't understand it, you know. But so anyway, I think one of the most important things about the Christian faith, truly, when you look in the scriptures, most important words, if you will, would be the word therefore. Every other religion has some form of offer yourself to God, and therefore, right, you will be accepted. God will be merciful to you. I would even go so far as to argue that only the Christian faith says God has been merciful to you, therefore offer yourself, rather than offer yourself, therefore God will be merciful to you. Hopefully you can see that distinction. So other religions, they go so far as to say, do these works and God will rescue you. And I would think the Christian faith, as presented from the historic Christian faith from the scriptures, would say God actually had to the Christian, God has rescued you, therefore you do these good works. It's not only non-Christian religions that make this kind of error, it's also some distorted forms of Christianity that make this error as well. So a large part, really, as KP said, he came to North Carolina, and his Bible Belt religion says, say this prayer, be a good person, go to church, do these good things, march in the community, depending on what churches you're a part of, and God will save you. But I want to say, like, clearly, emphatically, that is not Christianity. Christianity is God has done this amazing thing in Jesus Christ, and therefore, for you people who repent of their sins and turn to Him, then they will live for God's glory. And that part of living for God's glory is seeking the good of your neighbors. So it's a very practical question I think we have to ask is, where do you place your therefore? Right? Is it before coming to Christ or after? Right? And so, i.e., I do these things, and even good Christian things like lead worship in the church, go to church on a Sunday, play in the band, etc., etc. Then God accepts me. I will go so far as to say the Bible actually teaches no. That kind of mindset must be turned away from. I'll go so far as to say that. And we must say that for the Christian, God has accepted us. Therefore, we go and follow Him, and that means serving and doing good to our neighbors. And so I think that the measure of success, to kind of go back into what we're talking about, the measure of success in terms of like, what does public action mean? I think it's one thing for somebody to force you to do something. Like Islam does a lot of really good things for the community. Like that's a fact. Like a lot of mentoring programs, a lot of dudes that I knew who used to be some of the roughest, toughest gangsters that I've ever seen ever. Like were Muslim, they became Muslim, and now they're trying to, by their own effort, change themselves, right? And I think the problem though is that it's that therefore piece. It's like I'm actually doing these things to be accepted by God. As a matter of fact, Islam teaches that when you die, Allah is going to place your good deeds and your bad deeds on a scale. And if your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds, then you'll be accepted by God. So even God in the Islamic tradition is saying, therefore, do these things, then I will accept you. I think only Bible teaching, authentic, historic, biblical Christianity says, like the fruit of your life comes from the seed of the gospel, not the seed of your own effort and your own works. And so I think for the Christian engaging their community and wanting to love their neighbors, again, I think a measure of what does success look like? I think we have to understand success is a community project, a community work, like serving your community, providing resource. What does it look like to serve the motherless in your community, the fatherless in your community, by providing mentoring programs? And what does it mean to provide life skills training and coaching to under-resourced families and individuals? I think those things flow out of your Christian worldview. It's not doing something. You're not doing these things to show you're a Christian. It's like, no, I actually am a Christian. So I'm going into schools teaching kids about relational health and sexual ethics because I want to address the issues that I see in the school system. Right. Like I'm actually providing, not I, but churches can say, we are providing, after school programs to keep kids off the street. I could think of an organization in Philly the church is called Antioch Church in Philly, but they created a separate 501c3 called Level Up, and they've helped broker peace between neighboring gangs in Philly. Like they've actually like squashed beefs, and they provide food and clothing and housing and all that kind of stuff for
So
kids.
that could be a pillar of success in the pillars of when we set what the pillars are supposed to look like.
Yeah,
Is
right.
a church successful?
I mean,
There you go. That's the pillar.
The Panthers did
But
that too.
But that's what I'm saying. That the measure of
Kendrick Lamar did it too, but you know.
I guess that's my point in saying that measure of like that understanding of what success looks like. Success really does matter where how you align yourself class wise, which is why that count. Success can't be the exclusive measure, because my success and your success, usually middle class people want the same thing across ethnic groups. But it's when the middle class and the under-resourced or impoverished communities start merging with one another, they both have a different measure of success. They want different things, right? And then that transcendent Black measure of success wants different things. And so what does it mean to simply do good for your neighbor? What does it simply mean? What it means is simply live a simple life, doing good, loving your neighbors, caring for them, clothing the naked, providing. There's an organization I partner with in Raleigh called A Note in the Pocket. It's a faith-based organization, and what they do is provide clothing. But it's not one church doing this, as I said before. It's just like in the past, the SCLC, SNCC, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These Christians, it was not institutions as churches, it's Christians coming from out of their local churches saying, I know you, I know you, I know you. You have the same like heart for this and this and this and this and this. How about we come together to do this thing together that none of us can do it great on our own? And so I think that is an amazing thing, and it shows we can partner together, across denominational lines, if you will, to seek the good of our communities. And so even some of the stop the violence work, and some of the gun issues to address gun violence, like there's so many different organizations that are Christians these are faith-based organizations coming together to seek the peace of the cities that they live in, communities they live in. And again, all that to say,
absolutely,
I think we have to be really careful before we say a church needs to blank, because pastors have a responsibility not just to preach God's word, but to use God's word to steward the conscience of the members of the church. So the pastor is not the church. The pastor is a member of the church, but in his preaching, it's like if I got a bad back, like every week when pastors faithfully proclaim God's word in context, which I would even say is preaching expositional sermons, preaching God's word in its proper context, what they're doing essentially is lining the congregation up against the Bible and tuning them to walk in step with what the scripture said. And so I think the church, to what my sister said, I don't remember her name, but the church is a place for broken people. It is a place for people who don't always get it right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, the church is a place where everybody could be in our midst, like in our atmosphere, if you will, but not everybody could be in our membership. Like the church is a place for repentant sinners, not just sinners in and of themselves. And so that goes back to what the commenter said. It's the ethics question. It's like, the reason we can look at your ethics is question what you believe, because you live out of what you believe. Like it'd be kind of weird if a dude that's killing everybody with a machine gun then turns around and tell you, I believe God loves all people and I love people too. It's like, no, your ethics show what you believe. And so if you're going to a day party and
why is this attack on the day parties, man? I'm feeling
you started a day party.
I'm just messing with you, Maurice.
I'm giving this as an example to actually give you props to say, if you're going to a day party, if you're going to now it depends on what you are doing there. Are you getting bent? Are you out here like messing with chicks? Right. Are you cheating on your wife, cheating on your husband? Right. And you want to come to the church? I just want to get my religious fix. I think we have to be real with ourselves first and be like, I love the Christian religion, but I actually don't love the God of that religion, because our understanding of God shapes what we do. And that's not to say people who do get drunk or whatever aren't welcome around the Christian community, but it's a far stone's throw to say you can be around us before I start saying you actually are a Christian. And I think it's not for the individuals exclusively to determine that. It's for
So
the
can you say they
community.
don't? Can you say they
Yeah.
don't love God because they do
I'm
other
saying in
things?
terms of your ethics. I'm saying in terms of what you do.
He's saying
Right?
based on he's judging you on your walk and not your talk.
Right. It's not just what you say. Like it's the same thing my man said about the politicians greasing pockets and all that kind of stuff. Like it's what you. It's not like it's one thing for you to bring a like I'm not with bringing politicians because the church isn't for that. It's not for them.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
It shouldn't be.
A
Yeah.
politician can come sit under God's words like every other person does.
Mm-hmm.
However, at the same time, I'm not going to give him any mic time to start speaking. And then because again, a church could be filled with people of differently aligned political consciences. Like my man Leon said, like I always say, I said this to him last time he was cutting my hair. I said, I think I'm too liberal for the conservative. I'm too liberal for the conservative, but I also want to be too conservative for the liberal. Like, because it's going to be
and you should be that way. You should have no permanent friends, only permanent interests.
Right. So again,
make them all uncomfortable. Make them all uncomfortable. It is impossible for you as a black man, who we are today, to align with either one 100%. You cannot, and call yourself a straight shooter in this as a black man. Now, I'm only speaking as our black man experience.
I feel you. We
can't be. You got to have a little bit of both.
But at the same time, going back to what we talk about the church, though, like it's the pastor's responsibility to not allow his political convictions to now sway or like bind, if you will, the conscience of the members of that church to do what he thinks they should do. I could be in this space and say, you know what, if you're conservative and you believe in like you're for a stricter foreign policy in this way, and you're for open borders, or you're for et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, like what name the issue. I'm just saying there is a sense to where I need to know the thing that unites the Christian is not their view in politics. It's their allegiance to the Lord Jesus based on his word. Right. And so in that sense, I can love you even though we disagree politically. And so I think that now we can go to the mat and pull out the scriptures, because there's going to be some straight line issues that say, you know what, like the Bible here, policy here. I can look at the Bible and say, you can go from here to here. Name the issue. I think, this is a controversial thing. I'm not going to get into it. We can get into it, but it's going to distract. But like, if a person is for pro-life and they are anti-abortion, they could look in the scriptures and go from the scriptures to a particular policy. Now, pro-life isn't just pro-birth. It should be all from the womb to the tomb pro-life. So that means you should be for quality of life. That means you should be against killing the gentle, quote unquote, gentle killing of our elderly citizens. Like we should be pro-life all the way around, right? And so when we talk about like the Bible and ethics, the pastor, when he's preaching God's word, has to not bind or constrict the conscience of a person who says, you know what, I land differently on this political thing. And I think that the measure of success, and this last thing I'm gonna say. So when we talk about what success looks like, it has to look like I may view this thing differently than you. You may view this thing differently than me, but we are members of the same local church. But there's a church down the block over here, across the street, over town, where other Christians who see this particular issue is the same. We come together from our separate local churches to do good to our community, even though we in our local church can't do that, because I can't tell you the church needs to do this. Like
that's a separation. You gotta separate.
Yeah, that's the separation. But Christians have that freedom to say, I'm gonna get with Leon, and we're gonna actually go to do this community event in Durham, and he's gonna cut the hair, and I'm gonna like assess the needs of the family, because we agree that this need needs to be met, even if our local church moves in a different direction institutionally. We have to have room for that kind of difference. So success really does depend on what the Christian decides to do. And so again, that's me trying to pull apart the fact that in the back in the day, the pastor had to be all of those things, like all of these he had to be the lawyer, the doctor, etc. I'm saying now that the times have shifted, the pastor gets to do the thing pastors are actually supposed to do. And if he can free the Christian up by freedom of their conscience and say, okay, now you go and do blank, 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 blank. It's kind of like the church is a general practitioner, but the individual Christians partner together get to be the specialists. And I think that's where freedom, it lets you have that freedom. And so, yeah.
All right.
So go ahead, KB.
Oh no, go ahead. I'm fine. I didn't want. I thought you were going to moderate to something.
No, I was going to kind of get back with Larry. So what I'm trying to, so with you saying separate church from community or not staying in church, how I'm trying to understand. So you're saying go to church, but do stuff in the community without the church. Something similar. Is that what you?
I think the church can do stuff for the community. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Like what we've all been saying, the church can implement programs that can turn the community around overnight.
Which, and right, and it's okay. And Maurice just gave examples of that, what success looked like. So that's what we were talking about. What does success look like? None of us have the definition, but we all can speak to some action, right? And that's what Maurice went through a few of them. Like, oh well, I know this outreach has done this and this has done that, and now it's starting to shape what it's supposed to look like. Now we have a better definition of what success would probably or supposed to look like. And so I think that's so.
Add a little foundation to that. I mean, if we're talking about community-wise specifically, the success would look like helping the community mitigate their issues. That's baseline. You know what I'm saying? It's no matter what that community is dealing with. They're dealing with hunger issues. They're dealing with crime issues. It's all about, okay, how do we? Because all the other ethnic communities, they do this for their neighborhoods. That's why I say when they talk to councilmen, hey, we need more police officers over here. You got to figure out what the community is lacking and try to mitigate that. That's going to be like the foundation of what success looks like. How do we fix these issues?
And one more point to that, and I think that's dope. That is fire. Because you know what that does? It frees the individual. So the community is a mixed multitude of people, right? Yes. Every community we live in. And so to like, since we're talking about the church is it's called to be a believing community that's in the midst of the community, kind of like somebody said, in the world and not of it. Like you're in the world, providing good to the world. There's a Jesus used the example. He says, like, you're the salt of the earth. Preserve, like salt actually preserves society. Yeah. It doesn't detract from it until salt loses its saltiness and is thrown out on the street and trampled on. Like, and so in that sense, like, I think the problem though from a lot of us is that we're having is that we've encountered more sugar churches than salt churches. Like there's a lot of sweetness in terms of like just pacifying people, but causing their ruin in the end.
Facts.
And so I think that
which leads to a life of cavities.
Right, exactly. and so I think that when we talk about like how do churches like that's why I like what Leon said. Like this idea we need to back away from the church to me is like, hold up, like now who is the we? I think this might be controversial to say, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Like I think that the church is actually, it doesn't exist exclusively for the world. And somebody might say, well, what you mean by that? It's like, well, what I mean by that.
I'm gonna say it. What you mean by that?
I was gonna say it too.
Most important question, what you mean by that, right? Yeah. Because when I say the church doesn't exist exclusively for the world, I mean that it benefits the world because it's in the world. So programs,
facts.
It meets physical.
I immediately caught it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But in and of itself, it doesn't exist to like be a stopgap addressing all of the world's issues. It doesn't exist for that purpose.
Yes.
But there are Christians who are members of the local churches, as they gather, they're the church, as they scatter their individuals, because the word church means gathering or assembly. So as we're together as a group of believers and Christians together, the church has particular things that it does that is actually outside of the scope of the world, which is why I said before, people who don't know Jesus can be in our midst But people who actually do know Jesus, in as much as their life, what they say, how they live, and their doctrine, what they say, what they believe, come together, right? And so as we're doing good in the world, it's like, yo, I'm doing this for you, but I'm not seeking, like, you don't set the terms here, which is why the politicians can't come here. You don't set the terms here. You have a different authority in the political world, and the church has a different authority as it gathers together. And so all that to say, I think that when we talk about like the good that we do, the good that the Christians and the church can do, is endless. It's super duper endless. But the question on the floor is, has the church failed the Black community? I think that's why it's important for us to be clear about what we're talking about. Now, if your measure of success is driving the political culture of America, being the backbone of Black society, I think we've shifted from that, which is why I said initially that Pew Research study about how, religious, like, America is becoming gradually more secular. Secular just means without God, like, or it doesn't mean godless. It just means without God, right? Like, it just means I'm not putting a theocratic or theocentric, God-centered view in terms of how I'm maneuvering in the world. Actually, it's other things. It's how much money, like, I need to get this money. We need to get this paper. Like, we need to, and so I think that the church does, the believing community, one evidence, I think, of the gospel, impact of the gospel in the life of a person is a changed life. And if a changed life means change community, change family. Like, for example, me, I'm not this perfect dude, but my dad has he has 6 kids from 4 different women. I'm the first person in my family to get married. Why? It's because my understanding of my faith shapes the things that I do, because I understand God loves his people, and marriage is a dope thing. As a matter of fact, marriage is a picture of how Christ loved the church. So, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Ipso facto, I'm not just going to be sleeping with my girl. I'm going to marry her. So she's not my baby mom. She's my wife. You know what I mean? Like, not exclusively, just my baby mom, and that's it. And so I think that when we talk about like the good that Christians do, they're like reclaiming the family. I think if you don't have like the same gravitational center, then your understanding of what family looks like is going to be different, even though you claim to be a Christian. It's like what you claim doesn't matter. It's what you actually do. It's if what you do backs up what you say.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you something, Maurice, while we were talking about it. Well, alluding back to the question about the Muslim, you say that you were Muslim, you became Christian, right? And my education on it is trying to understand, am I off base by saying that there are more community involved as the Muslim church is more community involved than, let's just say, the American Black Christian church?
Yeah. So to answer your question, there's 2 answers to your question, and I'm not going to be long-winded. I'll just be brief. So the Muslim community actually wouldn't use the term church. That's a Christian thing.
They use a mosque.
Yeah, so Muslims gather in what you would consider a masjid or a mosque.
Okay.
So it is true, though, and I'm not even trying to knock the fact that they do a lot of dope, good, and awesome things in the community. Like I said, those mentoring programs, clean the streets programs, helping dudes get off the block, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My only point is your understanding of God shapes the work you do. As a matter of fact, let me go even further back. Your understanding of God shapes the good news he brings, the gospel he brings. So if your understanding of God is that I have to work for him to be accepted by him, then the motivating factor might be I love my community and want to do something good to my community. But underneath it all, it's because I want God to accept me. What I'm saying is the difference, though, is that the Christian says the therefore for the Christian is I'm doing these things not to be accepted by God, but because I already am in Jesus, right? In Christ. And so you can hate me all you want. I don't have to respect. You don't have to respect me all you want. But if I'm seeking to do good, it's not because I want your approval or God's approval. I actually have God's approval in Jesus. Like, I'm already fully approved of, because Jesus lived a perfect life in the place of sinners, living 33 years of perfect obedience to God, then dies on the cross as a substitute for sinners, where Jesus on the cross, a swap takes place. Jesus gets the penalty, believers get all of Jesus' perfect righteousness and eternal life. Like, so now I'm doing this stuff not so God can accept me, because he already does, because he always accepts Jesus. And if I'm in him, in Jesus, then God will accept me, not because of my works, but because of Jesus's works on my behalf. And so, yeah, they do a lot of good, but underneath it is because I really want God to accept me, not because I love
Oh,
him.
okay. So it's yeah. Okay. Like I said, I was trying to get an understanding of it. And I
It's
wanted
cool,
to
yeah.
answer. I wanted to answer the guy's question earlier, and we went into about. I think the question was, Leon might have moved away from it. Was how could I talk about the fruit and then want to be and then said I would be a Muslim? I was trying to understand, huh?
I was trying to find it
because I wanted to answer it, but I wanted more information from you before, because where my question where it derived from. It was from I already know the Christian walk. I know I know everything, right? And based off what it says, how can you talk about fruit if you say you would be a Muslim in another setting? I do not. I want to understand that. Like I was, I think I was saying that you can tell.
I think you said that as a joke also.
Huh?
You kind of said that kind of like as a side joke as well because of location.
Right. Yeah, right. Because of location. And so I'm not knowing. Yeah, I also have my own battle with Christianity within itself. So as I was talking, Larry, as I come into a new area with this battle I'm already fighting inside of my Christianity.
Hey, we got you, brother. We got you.
Right. I'm trying to understand. So I was like, so I think he's mirroring something together that shouldn't be. I was just saying based on what I know that and based with the struggle that I have with my Christianity, that I would probably be a Muslim, right? And that's what I was simply saying. But I want to define why, what my struggle with. Why I struggle with Christianity and its walk and its people and all that. I have evolved from it. I have evolved from it because when you start to learn a little bit more, I'm not going to say it's making you more confusing, but it actually brings more things to the table. And so I understand that in 1619, that the first 19 or so enslaved people showed up in Jamestown, Virginia. Mm-hmm. And those people, in everything that they had to go through, they were stripped of their native tongue, they were stripped of their culture, they were stripped of everything, but they were given one thing, and that was Christianity. Mm-hmm. That's what they were given. And so if you and your oppressor are serving the same God, I don't understand how that lines up. And when I start to push on this issue, and I'm looking at from 1619 to let's just say 1865, 240 some odd years, that person that gave you nigger gave you Jesus. And so it makes me question a whole bunch of these things, because when you are the big buck on the plantation, you the big one. This guy is over there in the barn praying to Jesus because he's getting ready to buck break you in front of all your family, friends, and you. And so while the mothers, the wives, and the children are over there praying to God, like, God, please don't let him do it. Please don't let him do it. And he's over there like, God, give me the strength. I need to break him. He need to mind me. And so the white man comes over there, buck breaks this guy. It happens. God didn't answer his prayer. He answered this guy's prayer. And so for years, all we've been given was this word of God to hang on to. And we prayed to God for, hey, just a little bit of civility, just a little bit of hope. And we never got it. Meanwhile, that same oppressor was praying to the same God, saying, God, I need these crops to come in. I need to grow my plantation. I need more money to buy more niggas. What I'm simply saying is, it seemed like who prayers got answered more than ours, because it took 247 years of 246 for us to even get free. And then you go through another 75 years of Jim Crow. And all the time, our people are on their knees praying that this doesn't happen, this doesn't happen. And the whole time they steady stringing us up, browning us, and lighting us on fire while we're praying to the God that they're praying to. And so when I look at today's evangelicals, there is no way I could be ever in the church, in these mega churches. You'll never see me in them, because there's no way we serve the same God.
Mm-hmm. Hold on, wait.
Happy Black
Time out.
History Month.
Time
No,
out.
I'm just saying this is my
Wait,
struggle with
hold-
Christianity because
hold up,
we've been
hold up.
praying.
This got to
Hold
be a
up.
part 2, baby.
That's what I'm about to say. Hold up. You done started a whole nother podcast.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry.
You the way.
You better leave us on the cliffhanger, baby.
Yeah. So what? So the question is, what do the Black church need to do? Is anything need to do? Anything the community need to do, or do they need to do it together?
Mm.
And
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
I can
the
sum it up.
question. We go do you go with and close it out.
I think the Black community, of course, got to take accountability of itself too. Like if you want to have cleaner streets, what are you doing yourself to make those cleaner streets? My whole issue was, we can't just run to the church and say, hey, I need cleaner streets. You know what I'm saying? The church ain't supposed to make our streets cleaner. That's not their job. It's our job. The church just a flagpole. That's where we were rallying at, just as a community. I'm not just talking spiritually, but just talking socially. That's where we were at, or where we were rallying at. And that's my whole point of, hey, we got to back off from that. If we want changes in our community, we got to step into that and make those changes ourselves.
Yeah, I think first of all, like KP just dropped a ton of weight, man. And I'm not gonna go through all of it, but I want to say, brother, like, I feel you, and I think that the evil and atrocities that have been perpetrated against our people have are just that, evil, wicked, and I think that the reality is too, we live in a world where injustice is often the flavor of the day, right? And so I think that for me, I'm saying that to say I empathize with everything you said, man, for sure. One quote that I love is not quote, but one book I should say that I love is one of my heroes is a brother named William Still, and William Still was a Christian as well. He was one of the primary conductors on the Underground Railroad, and one of the things that he actually helped to free Harriet Tubman. Like he was part of that whole thing. William Wells, I can put you on to resources about my man, but he actually, that quote from Frederick Douglass, I love what Douglass says this. He says, between the Christianity of this land and the Christianity of Christ, I recognize the widest possible difference. And so he says, like, not the woman raping, cradle plundering Christianity of this land is completely different than the peaceable Christianity of Christ. In fact, Frederick Douglass was a Christian. And so I think the suffering that our people have endured, one of the biggest lies that was told to us is that Christianity came to Africa through Africans, if you will, our people, exclusively through the bonds of slavery, and that's not true.
No, that's not true. Right.
And so there's even dating back to the 1st century, you got Mark the Evangelist, who came and spread Christianity to Egypt around 42 AD and helped start the Coptic Church. You got in the 4th century, the Axum Empire, Nubia, King Azana of Axum was one of the first, helped Christianity be one of the first Christian nations in antiquity. Even in North,
it's the oldest,
right. And it was never
out of that area you're talking about. Yeah.
And so all that to say is that there is a vast difference between what people have claimed to be Christianity in America versus the Christianity, true, authentic biblical Christianity, based on the scriptures. And so, our people were given a distortion of the Christian faith. And so the same thing you reject, I reject. You know what I mean? The same atrocities that were perpetrated in the name of Jesus. I reject that too, but they had they were given a false Jesus. As a matter of fact, the scriptures that our ancestors received were radically butchered. I mean, the story of Exodus, God's people, Israel, were in bondage and slavery in Egypt for 400 years. And that whole book was tore out because Exodus 1 says, God says, I heard the cry of my people in Egypt. Their cries have reached my ears. I've come to liberate them. Right. I desire to liberate them. As a matter of fact, one of the promises to Abraham was that your people will go and become sojourners in a land unlike their own, but I'm going to bring them out by a mighty hand. So God already knew that was going to happen, but it's not like God force that to happen. People operating in two poles are happening. Human choices and God's sovereignty are working together. That's not to say God caused this suffering. It's just that God is actually working through the suffering to bring about his intended purposes. But that does not mean God is the author and, is up here cheering that people were being oppressed in that way. But the reason I mentioned William Still is William Still, every time somebody would pass through Philly, he actually said, "Tell me the story of how you obtained your freedom." And he actually wrote all of those stories down in this book called The Underground Railroad, which is essentially and he did that to help families reunite with one another. Like it's very particular descriptions: skin color, hair texture, eye color, height, weight, names, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So 75 years after slavery, after emancipation, he actually published this book so that people looking for their families can be reunited, and he was a Christian. And so it is important that we talk about success and whatnot. Our ancestors have been victims of oppression, but we also been victors over oppression at the same time. And I think that to me is something worth championing, and whatnot. So we could go even deeper than that. If you want to chat offline, I would love to just continue to build.
Part 2, baby. Part 2.
Yeah. Part 2. Part 2. Let's get it. But all that to say, man, I think this is a dope conversation. And it's hit so many different twists and turns, but I think it's bringing us back to the same place of our people have a different understanding of what success has looked like. And I think this continuing secularization where different priorities are now coming into our community, what does success look like is a thing that we, even as apart from the Christian faith, Black people in America are constantly warring with one another about what success looks like. And that the receipt for that can't be placed at the foot of the church exclusively. We have to take some personal agents. That's why I was mentioning some of these other nonprofits. If we're not careful, we can outsource our own freedom to other people when we have the agency to say, I'm going to get up and do blank, 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 blank. There is a system that's seeking to oppress me. However, I'm not oppressed. I get to stand up and fight and push back against oppressing forces for my own liberation and liberation of my people. But we have to. There's no uniform Black community, so success is always going to look different depending on who you're talking to, which is why I'm saying the goalpost keeps moving. So we can't be deterred by the moving goalpost, but we can try to pursue as a people is faithfulness where we actually are and make change in that way. So yeah.
All right. Anything else, Rene?
Uh-oh. I think you muted. You mute.
Oh no, I was reading Ty's comment. How can church and community work together, not make it about money, things, show, or works, but about God and what is pleasing to him? Mm-hmm. Work together for good and not to elevate self in any way.
It should have always been that way.
That's
the problem. Yeah, it should have been that way. Yeah.
And one last thing, man. I hate the fact that some pastors, some people who claim to be pastors, are out here just pimping the people, fleecing the flock, man.
Exploiting the church,
exploit people, right? And so the idea that, because you know what begins to happen is people,
based on their interpretation, right?
Right. Well, so I think you said this earlier, and I wanted to comment on it. But you said we all have different interpretations. But I think that the scriptures are not the kind of thing you can interpret like a newspaper, though. That's the problem. And so it's not the kind of thing where
it can be preached on how I feel or how I look at it, right?
Right.
And so you preach that to your community.
So here's the thing, though, and if this is a pushback, hopefully it's received as a gentle one. It's that there's a such thing as a true or false. Like there is a such thing as objective truth, though. Something can be categorically false or something could be categorically true. A pastor telling you give all your money to me, and then that's to show that you honoring God, and I'm gonna go take your money and buy a Benz, and that is categorically false because that is nothing like what the God of the Bible is like. You never see Jesus doing that. As a matter of fact, it says that Jesus rode a donkey and it wasn't even his. like he wasn't rich, Toro. As a matter of fact,
I was going to say, but if you're, that's your pastor and you believe him and you're every Sunday and he's providing you with what the word is, but you're not taking upon yourself to do your own research and to review and read it and do all the things, you're going to give them all the money to get that Benz, right? Because that's what he said.
True, but here's a dope thing that I think that even like God in his word has not left us hanging about how to handle situations like that. There's a whole letter in the New Testament that addresses the same exact issue. The book of like Paul's letter to the Galatians, where first he doesn't even make any sort of railing accusations against the false teachers who are bringing in destructive heresies. Rather, he says, "You foolish Galatians, who's bewitched you?" Like someone has flipped, like, what have they done to make you turn against the master that bought you? Not talking about slavery, talking about Jesus purchasing a people at the cross for himself. And so the receipt for that piece, the bill for that, lands at the foot of the church. They are the ones in error, not just the pastor robbing them. And so you pay. I hate using like, because it can be so abused if we don't define our terms, but this language of the oppressed and oppressor, like you are paying this dude to theologically oppress you. That's the problem. Well, but that's on you.
It happens, right? We see it.
But you can't say, but not you. We can't say that is some part and parcel of what it means to be a pastor. Like the Bible actually does not promote that. That's false. Just like it's just as wrong for a pastor to pastors to preach messages that make you feel completely content in any kind of lifestyle you're living that goes against the scriptures. So I know we picked on a day party, but not day parties are dope. I love day parties. I love parties.
We're gonna see you there, Pastor Maurice. But we know we're gonna see you there.
But Jesus loved parties.
Listen, Pastor Maurice, what you doing here, brother?
Here's the thing. But I love parties because Jesus loves parties. But it's what you're doing at the party. Like the Bible says.
That's what I was saying earlier. It's be in the world, but not of the world.
Jesus said, like they say that like the Son of Man, talking about himself, Jesus, came eating and drinking. They call him a glutton and a drunkard. It's like, there is a sense to where I can't be so concerned what everybody thinks, but I do need to be concerned about what God thinks based on his word, not based on how I feel. And it's a problem if a pastor is making you feel like the way you're living, if it's contrary to the scriptures, is all good long as you just keep coming and giving me money. I'd rather you keep your money in for the sake of your soul. Keep your loot, but and that's the thing too. I think it's a problem when Christians start some churches, for the sake of behavior modifications, like they make you think God only cares about the things you do, not the heart that motivates the things you do.
Yeah, you twisting the spiritual ethics.
Right. And so in that sense, it's like, success from the terms of we're talking about the black church, we have to understand what is a church, what does it mean to be a Christian, how do Christians gather in the work together across church, like different churches, work together to accomplish good, and then say, to where it is actually you're supplying some good to the people. Jesus says, that's the thing that's going to get the good and well done, not you just go to church and say you're a Christian. But all that, I start all this to say, I feel you, KP, like about all of the oppression and all that kind of stuff. I'm thankful that in God's sovereignty, he allowed Christians to kind of lead true Christians, to lead the forefront charge to overthrow the slave system. For example, you got my man William Wilberforce, who helped to overturn and abolish slavery and the slave trade in Europe, because he recognized the scriptures. Actually, this is antithetical. And so again, it's like, so we have to have like some inside baseball talk conversation among Christians, but also outside baseball. This is what we do in light of what we believe, and the evidence of what you believe shows up in what you do. So if what you do is completely wild out all the time, you're not a Christian. And that's sometimes that's the most loving thing you could tell a person. It's like,
I think
you wilding out.
I think we can all share in the fact that, this all stands for finding a religion that aligns with you, your beliefs, your morals, your integrity, and your community. Right? And that's what you do. But also do your research.
Just be good, right? Just
be decent, man. Just be decent.
Yeah, just be decent.
But I mean, if you're looking for a religion, it has to align with you, right?
Well, yeah.
It does, but like again, I can, Leon stopped me because we was going to another thing. But
Go ahead.
No. I'm not going into it because it's going to be more confusing as to
you said
why
I stopped you earlier.
I question. Well, yeah, when you stopped me earlier,
Okay.
because when I was going into it, because I was going to. The only reason why we accept Christianity as the enslaved is simply because it mimicked some of the things that we were already practicing. And if you start looking and learning about Osiris and Oshun and how that and Horus, and you talking about the Aset. When you start looking at how Horus is born from a virgin, listen, it also when our ancestors heard these stories, he was like, you know what? That kind of matches Oshun. That is Osiris, and it's born of a virgin. Okay, Horus or Hebrew. And when you start learning more about the meta natura of that, or it's going to really confuse. It's going to really like, you know what? I don't know about this.
I feel you. Been there, man. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna have another part two on that subject. We're gonna bring that back.
You know what, brother? Let's put a pin in it.
Put a pin in it. Just put a pin in it.
And all I want to say to Jay Will, hey, much respect, man. Wasn't offended. I'm a person that needs to understand, and if I'm not understood, I want my brother to know where I'm coming from I don't want to offend. So I didn't take it as offense, brother. I just wanted to give you some clarification.
Yes, there are often claims of parallels between Horus, the ancient.
What you doing, bro?
Hey,
wait a minute. So I'm right.
I mean, you are right.
As we're talking, when you said it, let me look this up real quick. But I think it's
Pastor Maurice, you have not looked into Osiris and the
that's
story.
Another story, man.
Dude, go into that, man. When you go into the Yoruba, when you go into that religion, that's older. It's not older than Christianity, because Christianity came out of Egypt, and it's the oldest. But when you start looking at what we were worshiping and how it relates, the enslaved said, you know what? The born son of Jesus, son of a virgin from the father. I'm with it.
Taking it back to the Moors and Kemet, all that.
You take it back
to look, as y'all can see, that shelf he has back there, he likes to read. So you gave him something to look up and study and research.
Oh no, Leon, we got somebody that we could connect Maurice with that likes to read.
Oh no.
No, but Maurice, if you do a deeper style of I'm saying Osiris.
I have read the thing. It's funny, what you heard though wasn't me typing. I have my joint up, and when people are talking, is like a buzzword things, that words I usually use. It just pulled up all of this stuff. So it's not that I'm looking this up, like, because I actually have.
Oh man, that's dope.
And so so there's an app that I use.
iPhone.
Yeah, it's an app that I use that. But I would recommend you peep this book, man. It's called Urban Apologetics, and it kind of walks through some of the same stuff you're talking about, and it actually exposes the fact that those parallels between Horus and Jesus and all that stuff, those are actually false parallels. It's not, and also too, many people who came over to during the transatlantic slave trade were Christians too. They weren't all Muslim, and they weren't all Horus, and they weren't all it was a huge
right.
Africa was not just this monolithic thing, and so the way that the groups were kind of dispersed, like in terms of when they came over to this country, the groups that were similar to one another, it wasn't just a random snatching of people. They were able to see quartering people. Also, there would be no unity in terms of working together. And so, in a very real way, that conversation is definitely a conversation to have. I just think that we have to look into more clear, broader themes. Instead of looking for these loose parallels, but I would go so far as to say they're not similar, even though if you look on the surface, it's like somebody saying Islam and Christianity are the same because of Abraham. Well, no, we have to get into the meat of what is actually being taught and what's actually where those parallels, if there are any parallels, are they surface level or the deeper parallels, and if not, we have to kind of go where the evidence leads us, but we can't go there with a bias in mind that this is true. Because then you're actually not studying history correctly. If I have a conclusion in my mind, I'm looking for information to confirm my bias.
All right. Yeah. Check this out. Churches, community, black church, black community. Let's work together for a greater cause.
Yeah. For sure.
No leaving each other. Let's work together for a greater cause. Shout out to P. Nate and Now Church. He do a lot of great things in the community. I'm gonna shout him out.
Yep, there you go.
But anyway, yeah, there you have it. Great conversation. We'll be back for a part 2 of this. Great conversation. I enjoyed everybody's input in the comments. Make sure you go to impel4merch.com, impel4merch.com for all things Impel 4 merch. There you have it for another episode. Or 10. There you have it for another episode of the Impel 4 podcast. Remember, seize the opportunity to grasp your dreams. Peace.
Peace.